I'm all right. How you doing?
Good.
Good to see you, Daniel.
Yeah, good to see you guys as well.
Oh, I hear baby in the background. Whose is it?
Yeah, it's my daughter.
Nice. How old is she?
I had to run from her and lock myself in.
How old is she?
She's just a year and 8 months.
Oh, baby.
Wow.
Yeah.
Getting to the terrible twos.
Yeah.
I remember those.
That is awesome.
Yeah,
Well, it's
that's
funny.
two
I
of them,
totally
actually. Yeah.
I totally forgot about this. When I looked at the scheduling for this, I totally did not pay attention to the date. So I'm doing this presentation and then bouncing out for the rest of the day because it's my daughter's 18th birthday today.
Oh.
So,
Oh.
yeah.
Wow.
Goes
18.
fast.
Yeah, you don't look it at all.
And she's not even my oldest. 23
What?
is my oldest.
Wow.
23 is the oldest, yeah.
I remember your kids, you had your family in Montreal.
Yeah.
I remember
Yeah.
you were walking around with the family.
Yeah.
I can't believe they're that old now.
Yeah.
Makes me feel extra old.
You'll Daniel will get a kick out of this because I can only say this because I've got black on my parents' side, but the phrase "black don't crack" is a real thing, I think.
It's true, man. It's true. Pretty tough.
Yeah, I know. It's kind of funny. Yeah, I know. It's at least now I don't get asked if I'm my kids' siblings. You know, I look a little bit older than I did when they were younger, so I don't get that. Are you these are your siblings? But yeah.
Yeah, you don't age, JP. You just don't age. It's crazy. You look identical to when I met you.
Very thankful. Yeah.
What's in that bottle? What are you drinking?
I'll rock it for as long as I'm able, I guess. Yeah. Hey, Rick, how you doing?
It's beautiful.
Ooh, Rick's got a cathedral background. Actually, no, that's Doctor Strange. It's the sanctum. Yeah, it's the New York sanctum. Yeah. Clever.
Ah, yeah, so we have another 5 minutes and then we'll start.
No.
Yep.
How is the font?
I'm on a desktop computer, so it depends if anyone's on their mobile device. That might be the person to ask.
Boo!
That's
Okay, well, that's yeah. I didn't think about mobile.
Yeah.
I'm on a laptop screen and it looks just about right.
Okay, perfect. I honestly, I don't. Maybe I'll just like this is not a presentation. This is like anything that I'm talking about here has got nothing to do with anybody on their mobile device. So I really am not going to worry about scaling down to meet their mobile needs.
Yeah, stretching you thin, you know.
Yeah. And I thought about running screen key, but then I realized that it's none of the output's going to make any sense because it's going to look like I'm pulling off some ridiculous hand gymnastics because of the bindings, the layer system. So I just was like, forget it. I'll just leave it. Yeah.
You have to implement your own that shows the layers graphically.
Yeah, you know? No, it's actually there is if I ran the one tool, but it would take over my desktop, which is not what I want. So, but that's what I did when I was in training mode for that. Is it actually does it will it highlights the layer you're on and the keys you're typing, and then as you transition between layers, it kind of just keeps moving with you. So that way you can kind of learn. So when you're trying to learn, you don't have to look at, there's no keys to look at because it's, there's no keycaps no covers on the caps. But then also because each layer could be doing something totally different, it's better to just be able to keep your eyes looking forward and be learning as you're trying to do things.
That's same with me, JP. See?
Nice.
I'm definitely in the preschool mode of what you're at, but at least it's got no markings. Because I used Dvorak, so the keys don't make sense. I just don't bother with a keyboard that has any bindings.
Probably worse than you because I know next to nothing about what you guys are talking.
So is that
talking about keyboards?
Oh yeah, I've actually
I'm
got
getting
the
crazy with
I've got
keyboard.
the I've got the progression here. Like and what I'm gonna try to do, like, because I'm trying to like I want to try to keep things relatively relatively low key and high level. And so I think
Yeah.
it'll be better just kind of like I'll go through the initial slide deck, which will be very brief, and then I'm just going to kind of outline each of these kind of high level tools / principles, and then we can kind of walk through some kind of really simple but repetitive, useful workflows that I use all the time. And then after that, we can just go into questions and just general, because again, I know this is a completely different thing from what this meetup is all set up for. So I just appreciate Adam giving me I literally haven't done a presentation like this for years. So, I'm just honored that he asked, but at the end of the
this
day,
is awesome.
yeah, it doesn't really have anything to do with event modeling per se, but
you know everything about event sourcing and all that kind of stuff anyway in architecture. So you're right on topic anyway. You can talk about whatever you like, and I'm sure
totally
it's
cool.
relevant because a lot of us code, and you show what that means to a level that no one's probably gonna attain ever.
Well, and I thought
At least not that I know of.
I thought for this first one, I'm not gonna do anything crazy with like what I used to do in those public presentations where people would just be left kind of like, what the heck is this guy doing? So for those who don't know, so what Adam's referring to is when we met, which was, oh my goodness, I want to say like 2000.
Well, we met online in various forums, but
Yeah.
I met you for the first time in 2007.
Yeah.
In the summer, I think, or spring. I think it was like May. I forget when DevTeach used to be on in Montreal.
Yeah.
But it used to be, I think it was May or something like that. And I remember it was sunny.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. All right, so should we start, or we?
Yeah, I think we're at. We had 10 minutes for people to join, so.
All right.
The latecomers can see the recording.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. All right. So again, here's the thing, guys. Because this is, because we are, a small group, and I'm not trying to be formal in the sense of this presentation or anything. Like, please feel free at any moment to stop, ask questions, interject. Right. This is just a conversation between peers and friends, right? So it doesn't have to be anything crazy formal, and just have everyone watch me for the next 2 hours. That would actually be the worst thing, I think. It'd be nice to kind of get some dialogue going and feedback. So feel free to jump in.
Just one housekeeping thing.
Yes.
There's two. Rick is going to help with moderating and admitting people, and of course, if Rick, you can also help people that forgot to mute themselves if they have background noise. I'm going to try to be on top of it as well. Just
You'll
so
have
the
to make me
recording
a
is better.
co-host.
Right?
I'm still not a co-host, Adam.
Oh, I thought you were. Hold
What
on a second. Let me double check. Oh, okay. I thought I clicked on this. I guess I didn't. Okay.
There we
Perfect.
go.
See? Okay. Housekeeping done. Krzysztof's here as well. He's always co-host as well. So we'll do that too, just in case. All right, JP, sorry about that. Just some housekeeping about making things nice for the recording.
Yeah, no worries.
I mute myself a lot too. I just have a button on my mic though, so you don't see me muted.
Yeah, okay, cool. All right, so this is just a super brief about me for those who, I'm not making any assumptions that anyone knows anything about me at all. So basically, Develop with Passion is a company that I founded back in 2006. And this was basically the realization of a dream that I had to break off on my own to do independent consulting. So from 2000 to 2006, I was primarily just a professional coder. So here's the brief about me, right? So obligatory about me section, right? So I started coding when I was 8, and I did a year, right? So this is not one of those, ooh, he's a wizard who started coding at 8 and didn't stop coding. I coded for 1 year, and then I didn't touch a computer again until I was 20 years old. Right. So, yes, opportunity lost potentially, time for sure. But looking back, that 1 year made all the difference when the time came back around to start really digging into what it was I could see myself doing as a career. So I really am thankful for that time, and I don't lament the time not spent during those 12 years in between. My wife and I were married at 18, so we got married literally about 2 to 3 months after we graduated high school. So very, very young by all accounts. I used this picture because we probably looked that young, hilariously, right, when we were getting married. So, you know, so we got married young. Now, here's the thing. I put this slide in here for a purpose. One of the things that I'm really big, you know, I talk to a lot of people, whether it's in my consulting gigs or the ad hoc training that companies call me in to do. I talk a lot about having a vision and then executing on that vision. And one of the things that was impressed on me at a super, super young age was this concept of, you know, basically, you know, really dig in to try to see if you can find something that you're going to love doing. And, you know, my dad's a very accomplished doctor, and growing up with him and watching, you know, he started everything late. Like, he wasn't like one of those guys that started school young and just whizzed through. And he started medical school at, I think, 27 years old, which is really quite far ahead in the game, right, for playing the doctor game. And, you know, so I actually got to watch some of the struggle that he had to go through. And when I say struggle, I just mean the amount of work, dedication that he had to actually, you know, building out this career. And I remember when I was 12, he said to me, you know, what do you want to do with your life? Now, I mean, seriously, in hindsight, it was probably a not smart question for him to ask a 12-year-old, because how many 12-year-olds know what they actually want to do with their life?
Program video games.
Yeah. And I actually said, I don't know. And I remember his response to me, and it's funny, you get things you remember when you get older, but it definitely stuck with me, because he said, I really, you know, I don't care if you choose to be a garbage man. And, you know, and this meant a lot to me, because my dad arrived in the UK at 17 with no family and 50 pounds in his pocket. That was it. And built himself up from there, right? So here's this guy who I've witnessed my entire life, just, you know, pursue a goal and is a diligent worker. And so for me to say to him, I don't know, I was kind of nervous. And, you know, I love my dad, but he was the kind of guy that if I couldn't do math with him when we were trying to study, you know, the belt came out, right? Like, I mean, old school, right? And, you know, so I was kind of nervous to say, I don't know. And he said, I don't care if you're a garbage man, right? As long as you can be the best garbage man that you have the ability to be, right? And it's funny, because even that phrase, right, he didn't say be the best garbage man in the world, right? He said, be the best garbage man that you have the ability to be, right? And I really think that's an important point, because, you know, a lot of us individually and people we talk to, and even if we're talking to our kids, we always talk to them about, oh, you know, be the best, be the best, be the best. But the thing is if we don't actually qualify that statement with be the best with what you have the capacity to use, I think it can set people up for potential disappointment, right? I can sit down at the piano for the next 5 years and work my butt off. Am I going to be playing concert halls? Maybe not. Am I going to be able to actually, you know, bang out some high level, you know, maybe grade 9 pieces, right, that sound pretty decent? More than likely. Is it going to be easy? Not at all, but it's possible, right? And I'm not talking about like, let's lower our bar so we don't try for things that seem outside of our reach. That's the exact opposite I'm saying. But what I'm saying is, you know, just that simple vision statement for where you want to go. And why is this important? Why am I rambling for a second? Because I was on a roll student all the way up until my last year of high school. And then I just dropped everything, right? Dropped everything. And I didn't care, right? I didn't care. And my wife and I got married, and a year in, we were living in a fourplex. You know, we'd had Isaiah, who's our oldest, and we were making less than, I think, $950 a month. And we hadn't figured out how to keep a house tidy. You know, we, by all accounts, we looked like the epitome of what you would envision for people who get married young and have a baby young and don't have their life figured out. And you know, something happened at the place I was working at, and I don't need to recount the story, but it was one of those moments, those kind of pivotal moments that, you know, it's a crossroad moment, right? It's a moment where you get a choice to change your life or stay the same. And, you know, I went back home that night and I said to my wife, you know, I don't believe that we're walking in whatever path that God had outlined for us. And I think that we're settling. And I think if we actually sat down right now and actually just dreamt together, right? We, you know, and I just read this book called The Purpose-Driven Life. And so this whole concept of purpose and, you know, what are you doing? And was really kind of echoing in my brain. And, you know, we just sat down and I said to her, okay, if we weren't constrained by what our current situation looks like, the fact that I bombed my last year of high school and all these other things, what would our life look like? What would we want to be doing, and how do we make it happen? And that simple activity that kind of resulted in a bunch of bullet points that we listed down became the initial filter through which every other activity we did got passed through. Not just activities, friendships, all of it. Right. So, you know, you know, and, you know, the kind of recurring theme that kind of has been persistent through our whole life has been be comfortable being uncomfortable. And, you know, don't allow yourself too much time to be comfortable, because that's where sometimes complacency can set in, right? And that applies across the board, whether it's your fitness, your relationships, right, your skill set, right? Don't allow yourself too much time where you actually just pat yourself on the back, basically, right? So long story short, I'll carry on with this, right? So here we are, first 2 kids by age 21. And, right, so I started programming professionally at 22 years old, right? So I'm going to skip the whole how did I become a programmer story, right? It was hard, right? It was hard. It was difficult. I went back to high school, right? You can imagine going back to high school as an adult, how fast did I want to get out of that environment? Yes, very, very fast.
Were you in an actual high school, or were you doing it remotely?
Oh no, I literally went back to high school. Like, I didn't do high school in college. I went back to high school.
Oh wow. Well,
right?
they probably looked at you and say, "You look young enough. We can let you back in."
yeah, right. And again, what was the motivator there was, even though you're right, I wasn't actually that much older than the guys in that grade 12 year. It felt uncomfortable, right? I felt like I should not be there, right? And that kind of, you know, that kind of feeling was the motivator to get finished as fast as possible, right? To get moving on to the next step, right? So, right, so I started programming professionally at 22, and it says fast forward 16 years. It's actually technically 20 years now. This is an old slide deck. I'm kind of repurposing it. Right, so this is my wife and I in the UK, and our kids this is not a recent picture. They're a lot older now. So yes, they are almost all taller than me now, which is not a challenge since I'm only 5'5". But, all right, so my son on the right, Isaiah, he's 23. Joshua on the far left is 21. Anya, our only girl, is 18 today. And Elijah, the little one in the front, is now 14 and definitely taller than me. So, which I prayed for all of my boys to be taller than me, because yeah, it's nice to see that. I mean, again, 5'7", 5'9" is not crazy height, but it still feels nicer than 5'5". So, you know, so now we're a family of 6, and this is the best way I could classify myself. Right? Not a software developer, not an engineer, right? It's a professional unlearner. And the reason I say that is, believe it or not, and for those of you who have read the book Pragmatic Thinking and Learning, you're very familiar with this phrase, but unlearning is actually a skill, right? The ability to actually let go of your old ideas and grab onto something new with almost a completely blank slate and no assumptions about how it could or should work is actually a skill that a lot of us as software developers rob ourselves of the ability to actually acquire.
I think
Right.
most people in this meetup, JP, are here because of that. I think a lot of the event-driven thinking that people have to do in this type of approach requires it. I think you struggle if you don't get a clean slate from certain perspectives. So
yeah.
When I saw this slide, it's like, whoa, that's why you're here.
No, but you're right. Like anyone who's in this meeting right now, for sure, right? I mean, I guarantee, you know, what's the hardest thing, right? When you're looking at something new like event driven, one of the hardest things to do is not look at it through the lens of what you already know, right? Not try to find some parallel back to what you already know, because the parallel you're trying to draw can actually be a constraint to the learning itself. Right. So I you know, one of the things I've found is in the last several years, I've had to work with teams in deep functional environments. And in some cases, I'm working with teams where the senior devs on that team, this is their first foray into the functional realm, and they're trying to draw parallels back to OO, and it is a losing battle, right? It's a losing battle. Right now, I'm not saying the patterns, right? Like there's a lot of patterns. If we talk about classic design patterns, there's a lot of patterns, right, that are applicable in the functional realm. But that's the beauty of patterns, is there was no constraint for them to be bound by a particular language paradigm, right? But what happens, right? You pick up something like, you know, let's say, you know, I mean, the reason I always recommend when people jump into functional languages, pick something like Haskell or a Lisp-based language, is so that you don't have the ability to actually lean on a familiar syntax at all, right? If you go from only having worked with C-based languages to now you're going to use some sort of Lisp-style language, there is no hope in you actually drawing a parallel between syntax, right? None. And that's a good thing. Right? It's a good thing, right? Because you are forced to look at that with a completely fresh set of eyes.
Yeah, it's a lot of times what we do here is we talk about zero tech, not leaning on any libraries or frameworks, so that you can learn a paradigm of what it is like to, you know, make a read model out of a series of events and really feel directly the impact of some of these new ways of thinking.
Yeah.
But if you adopt everything traditional, you know, like you said, we find a lot of people that just says that continue to come back to very basic questions. Well, how do I do this that I used to do? And they stop there. Right.
Yeah. The first point of friction, the issue must be the paradigm itself, right? Not the learner.
Yeah, you know, I fell into that trap lately. I was introduced to event sourcing barely 6 months now. So I realized that most of my code, I had to rewrite them all over again because I was struggling to do crude on event sourcing.
Yeah.
And it just didn't fit right. And so to me, this makes a lot of sense.
There was it's funny, there's a really good, you know, one of the things, like I do internships with people, and one of the things that we talk about, and again, it might seem a little redundant, but it's actually practical, is we talk about spending a little bit of time learning some non-trivial math. And the reason I say this is not because I feel like every programmer needs to be a math wizard, right? It's because going back to what Adam said about learning the basics and the fundamentals, right? And I'll use Daniel's example. If all you've ever done is build CRUD applications, all you'll ever see is CRUD, right? You will actually try to see the problem as a CRUD problem, right? And miss out on, right, a ton of other options that could be at your foray by leaning on nothing but fundamentals, right? So the thing is the reason it's good in that, you know, when you're kind of unlearning and starting over again, to let go of everything you thought you do. You have to let go of everything you thought you knew, right? Right. So, right now I put this thing about the future, right? Because there's so many different directions, right? Am I ready, right? And again, I'm sure you guys have all felt like this when you're talking, you know, when you're jumping into this new foray, right? It's tough being the leader, right? It's tough being a leader. I'm not going to say the leader. It's tough being a leader. And any of you that are trying to introduce, you know, event modeling or event sourcing and that whole approach to design in your organizations, you're a leader. And sometimes it's, right, you have to kind of position yourself and prepare yourself for a little bit of a lonely journey for a while, right? Because it sometimes is, right? You're going to have a lot of opposition. You're going to have a lot of, right, people looking at you with this guy's a Looney Tune face. And in all honesty, you're going to have to brace yourself for the times that you will make mistakes, and that approach is going to be the one to be blamed, right? And you just kind of have to resign yourself and remain resolute to the fact that it's going to be tough in the beginning, right? Whatever it is, right? And it ultimately, right, if you see it all as a matter of being prepared, it helps you kind of stay the course, right? So I put this on here for, right? This is kind of not related to this talk, but actually really, this is one of the, you know, one of the things, one of the things I talked about when Adam and I were talking is we wanted to talk about like story. And, you know, one of the things, and this goes back to exactly what Adam said about focusing on fundamentals is there was a season in my life where, you know, from about 2006 till about 2013, I was doing an active consulting schedule, but I also did about 1 week a month where I would run these, what I'll call software craftsmanship boot camps. So they were 1 week. They were 1 week, usually 5, 12 plus hour days, right? Long, hard days, right? Almost entirely code centric. And the constraints to the exercises were, we don't get to use any third-party libraries because we're going to focus on fundamentals, right? Focus on algorithms, data structures, design patterns, and I did that boot camp series with probably over, you know, I want to say over 4,000 developers globally over the course of those, you know, over the course of those 8 years, and that was me in groups of 16, right? So you can do the math. Right. And these were developers from all over the map, right? Microsoft, Google, like you name it. They probably, you know, a lot of them have been through it. And in 90% of the cases, guys, right? 90% of the cases, right? With day one being a focus on literally, all we did was focus on functional composition on day one. Even if we weren't in a functional environment. Most people were, the statement across the board, 95% of the cases was, I don't think I have a clue what coding actually looks like, right? And the point of that first day, guys, wasn't to sit in front of everyone and be like, look how smart I am, look at, right? It was to have everyone have that realization of that moment, because the question that I posed to them on day 2 is exactly this. Why is it that you've went so long not having that feeling? Right? Why is it that you've went so long not feeling a little bit out of your element and completely blown away by, you know, an alternate approach as to how to do something? Right? That's the bigger issue. Right? You're always going to meet amazing developers, right? Every single one of you, right? All of you probably are amazing developers, right? Finding amazing developers isn't the challenge, guys. It's having those moments optimally on a daily basis where you feel completely out of your element, right? It's the reason to this day why I still do, you know, why I still do code katas, right? Except the code katas that I'm doing now, right? I don't usually get to finish in a 20-minute session anymore because some of them have me scratching my head, right? For days on end, right? And it's a good feeling to feel like a goofball, right? It's a good feeling to not be like, oh yeah, I'm brilliant. I just get this. This is awesome, right? Because that's how you stretch, right? And so that building on the fundamental building blocks, right? There's like so much you can do, guys. And again, I might be preaching to the choir here, so I apologize if I am, but the
No,
reality is,
every one of us needs the reminder.
right?
I mean, the most recent one that I did is, that looking at that templating thing that I showed last time.
Yeah.
I could have just used the library. I could have just gone with Golang and used the mustache template there and just got on with it. But I think it would have been a missed opportunity to just understand fundamentally what templating engines do for you.
Everyone here has heard the phrase, everyone here has heard the phrase, don't reinvent the wheel, right? But here's the thing, forget about reinventing the wheel, right? When like every single great developer that I know, right? They've written their own rendering lib. They've written their own OR mapper. They've written their own configuration library. They've written their own fill in the gap. And here's the thing, 99% of those devs who wrote those things, those libraries are not used outside of anything other than, could I build this? Right? That's it. That's the qualifier. Could I build this? Right? There's so much learning you can do with the prefix of, right? Could I do this? Right? There's a great quote by Eric Evans quotes him in his book, but Jimmy Nelson, right?
Yes.
And he says, and I love the quote, and I read it years ago, and it really kind of echoed what I thought, right? Use the tool, knowing you can achieve the same result without it, right? Use the tool, knowing you can achieve the same result without it, right? So this is not about us not using tools, right? I'm not advocating, and I know Adam's not. We're not advocating don't use tools. That would be dumb, right? My whole presentation is literally going to be on tools, right? So this is not about using tools, but it's about can you use your tools, right? One of the phrases I used to use with the people that I work with is, you're either going to be a a consumer developer or a producer developer, right? Pick which one you want to be, right? The consumer developers are only as good as the tools they have at their disposal, right? The producer developers can use the tools, but also know they completely can circumvent them or replace them if need be as well, right? And there's a level of confidence. It's not arrogance. There's a level of confidence that comes from knowing that you are not tool bound, right? Because the problem with being tool bound in the realm of software, guys, right? And the reason that I think it's good that you guys are going through this whole event sourcing exercise without using tools is you don't get to blame crappy design on the tool set you're choosing. If you end up with a crappy design, it's because you had a crappy design, right? That's it, that's all, right? Right, and the way that most of us use our tools is we design our systems around the tools versus, right, making the tools conform to the design of our system, right? And in my opinion, event sourcing, event modeling is, in my mind, one of the cleanest ways to actually have designs revolve around, like tools revolve around our design and not the other way around. Because the thing is, how we choose to implement how we choose to implement processors, handlers, right? It's an implementation detail based on what that specific handler should actually be doing. We're not even constrained to actually maintain a single stack for a logical application. It doesn't matter anymore, right? So the argument about, which language are we going to, well, you know what? Use the language that makes best sense for that particular handler, right? Doesn't matter, right? So, right? And yeah, most devs form habits based on the first 2 years out of school. I would actually requalify this statement to say most developers form 70% of their developer habits in the first 2 years at their first place of employment. Right? So
I think that's way more true.
Right? Yeah. In the first 2 years of their working career, I should say, right? Sorry, Adam, go ahead.
No, I totally see that. I mean, I certainly, well, I've been coding for a long time, and I think that that may be true for, might have been true again for me again after many years. At a certain point, I was coding in VB6, and I didn't stick to that.
Painful, painful.
I didn't stick with that as my go-to.
I wonder why. Oh yeah, yeah. Right. So here's the thing. This is not so. You know, one of the reasons that I recommend, and I didn't talk about books on the book list, and we're going to get through this in a second, but there's 2 books, in my opinion, that should be the prerequisite reading for anyone entering some sort of software engineering discipline, whether they're being an independent learner or whether they're actually going to school, right? And the top of that list for me is literally Pragmatic Thinking and Learning, right? That book, right? Followed by Pragmatic Programmer, right? Those 2 books, honestly, if more developers read and applied the concepts in just those 2 books alone, the dev landscape would look radically different, right? Radically different, right? So,
although you have to qualify that with which editions of Pragmatic Programmer, because
good point.
I think it's changed quite a bit.
It's probably changed quite a bit. I actually haven't looked at the new one yet. Like, I actually picked it up, but I haven't even went through it yet. So, so for me, it's very much probably what's the word? Yeah, I'm still very much bound to the old one, but you're right. You know, I'm going to highlight the key practices coming out of that book that apply to what we're talking about today. And last couple of things, and I don't think I have to worry about this with this group. You know, this is year 20 for me as a software developer, right? This is year 14 for me as a telecommute software developer working from anywhere I want in the world. Right. So, you know, I'm still as excited about software as I was when I first got out of school, if not more so. And that's not accident, guys, right? That is not an accidental thing, right? Every single one of us probably has either experienced or witnessed people who maybe even very early on are already kind of resigned to their fate with respect to software engineering, right? You know, it's just something they kind of have to survive, right? I mean, think about it. I remember when TDD was kind of like at the peak of its conversation level, and you know, a lot of the top level practitioners in that space, we would give presentations, and it really probably did sound like we were talking about some kind of unicorn thing that just would, because no way that could possibly work or exist or happen, right? And why? Because most people spend the majority of their career going from dysfunctional environment to dysfunctional environment, right? Where the same problems are manifesting over and over. So it's understandable that people would be skeptical, right? Because until you've actually had a chance to work with a very, very high performing team, it literally probably does sound like, a bit of a, fantasy. Right?
That's why, like, meeting someone like a mentor is key. For me, a pivotal point in time was meeting people like JP, like Greg Young, that would have a set of expectations enormously higher than any other place I've worked in terms of understanding, practice, execution, all around understanding, and certain, personalities like Greg's to, use their knowledge to basically say, you must unlearn what you've been talking, what you're talking about. And I remember a key point in my time, I was very, very proficient in mock frameworks and TDD, and I could use a ton of them, and BDD, Storyteller, and all these things that were just so advanced and really key in terms of what Agile was after in the tooling. And then for someone like Greg Young to say, you're wasting your time, you're chasing the wrong answer, you're absolutely limiting your understanding to a very base level. you'll never get past this. To hear it from someone like that and say, okay, well then, what do I need to understand? And to take everything you're proud of and all your ego is wrapped up in, and literally put it in the trash can beside you and say, all right, let's start again.
Yeah.
You need to find people like that sometimes to get into that situation, to get out of your regular thing. Because sometimes, even though you think you're in the community, even like this, you're in an echo chamber.
Yeah.
It's a different level of comfort, and it's always about finding that next step and having someone that's where you want to be, and someone that's willing enough to hold out their hand backwards and pull you along. That's really key. So it's one of the reasons this community exists, and why I had to form a company and all of these things, and why JP had to do what he's doing and teach people through his boot camps. You just need to do that for people. You understand that you were there once before, and you need to do the same thing for others, for better or worse. I think JP's a little bit more disciplined than I am on execution, but I do my best.
It's
I'm grateful for being
ahead,
here.
So what was it, Dan?
I said now I'm feeling grateful for being here because it's an eye opener really. The expression that struck me the most was consumer developer, being as good as the tools you use. And I was like, wow, my life literally revolves around the tools I use. And it's crazy. It's crazy just thinking
an awesome
about it
quote.
right now. Yeah.
Right. So one of the things that you know, and we're going to talk practices, like very kind of concrete practices, kind of in a minute. But speaking practically on this perspective of what Adam said about not getting in an echo chamber, right? One of the things I encourage all the people that I work with in my internships to do, and I do it for myself, is I commit to doing 3 super challenging technical interviews a year, even when I'm not looking for work. Because I'll tell you this, if you haven't live coded in front of people for a while, it's nerve-wracking.
For you, no way.
Oh no! Don't get me wrong. If I go for long periods of time and haven't done one, it's nerves fully come back, right? 100%, right? And that's why you kind of have to get, get into the mode of just doing it consistently. But the thing is for exactly what Adam said, right? You could love where you're working, and I'm a contractor. I'm actually technically now an employee. For the first time in 14 years. So this is kind of interesting, but that's a whole other discussion. Great company. I'll have another talk about that later. But but that practice of being out of your comfort zone and doing interviews for the sake of sharpening the sword is one that I wholeheartedly agree in, right? And one that I'm maintain doing, right? So I did one just earlier this year where it was for a web-based position, and they wanted me to code up a traffic light simulator on the fly, right? And so literal with the UI and everything, and and so not a crazy complicated problem, but again, enough of some kind of algorithmic interesting parts to it that were you wouldn't think about right off the bat when you're just kind of sitting there, right? So, and that was my first one of the year, and it was a little rough, right? It was a little rough, but it was a good back and forth conversation, and and again, it's just the practice, right? So the thing is everything we're going to talk about, these are tools and approaches and techniques that everyone knows. Right? Everyone who's read Pragmatic Programmer knows what to do. The difference is actually executing on it, right? Actually taking the time to actually, do the work, right? Everyone knows how to get in shape, right? Not ridiculously complicated, right? The hard part is actually maintaining consistency over the long haul, right? Working out's a piece of cake. Working out, right? 3 days a week, piece of cake. Working out 3 days a week, right, for the entirety of your life, that is the challenge, right? That's the challenge, right? So, right, I love this. I love Einstein, right? Einstein's quotes are perfect. He's got so many. 2 of my favorites are this one, right? This one, and my favorite Einstein quote is, opportunity is missed by most people because it's dressed in overalls and looks a lot like hard work. Right. And it's very true. Right. Right. So here's the thing. Like,
I will
what
warn
is the
people
point?
against using AJP. I
What
will
was
warn
that?
people
Sorry.
about using that quote, that Einstein quote you just showed. Don't use that quote to try and convince somebody who's not ready.
Yeah, good point.
Okay, if you ever imagine yourself when you're doing something and you're not aware of it and you're doing it over and over again, and someone pulls that quote on you.
Yeah.
So just be aware this quote is a dangerous quote. You use this to your executive, your person who is complaining about doing this, but then doing it again. Don't use this quote on them. You will not be able to get through that conversation. They'll shut down, they'll tune you out. It's not going to actually open them up. It's the right conversation, but it hurts when it gets when someone else catches you doing it. You need to catch yourself. That's
very good point, Rick. Yeah, I appreciate the it's there's a lot of wisdom in that statement. You're right. Honestly, that goes back to the whole know your audience, right? Right. Know your audience, and you're right. So yeah, absolutely. I appreciate that.
My other favorite Einstein quote is, "The problems we have created cannot be solved at the level of thinking that created them."
That's a good, that is a good one. Yeah, that is a good one. No, it's awesome. Yeah.
Little interjection.
No, please. Yeah, not happy to have you interject. Right. So I put in Outliers. I'm sure, most of you might have read it. A fantastic book. But, some of the case studies you talk about in there, the ones that one of the earlier ones is why are Chinese so good at math, right? And, and they just talk about, well, is it the combination of the fact that their language is actually optimized for dealing with large numeric strings much better than English, right? Is it the fact that they actually do their initial base mathematics in terms of focusing on place value and really hammering home the concept of place value, right? Like if you think about how they add, it's always, we've got 10,000s, right? 900s, 10, right? It's whatever, right? It's part of how they actually, right? So he goes through this example of, when we talk about outliers, this is concept of what is it about the people who have achieved, like incredible feats? What is it that separates them from everyone else? And in a large number of scenarios, like I've been coding for 20 years now, I've literally met one prodigy, right? One actual bona fide prodigy, right? And he wasn't even the best developer that I met, right? He was great, right? He's been coding since he was, 9 years old without even thinking about it, right? But that's the exception, not the norm, which means all these other developers that I've met, right? These developers that have blown my socks off and, just have a level of proficiency and ability that is just mind-boggling. The only difference between them and everyone else is the practice, right? It's the practice, right? And, there's this great book, if you ever get a chance to read it, and I'll try and list these down because I know I'm rattling off a lot of books, but there's this great book called Bushido. It's basically it became the blueprint for how Japanese business actually ended up functioning, right? But there's a section in the book talking about high upon high. And it's the kind of progression to mastery, right? And the very last step on the progression to mastery is the realization that you don't know anything at all. And the only thing you have left to do now is move forward with the pursuit, not attainment, of mastery in mind, right? At that level, you're still way ahead of the people that are stuck in what we'll call the expert phase, right? The experts, right? I mean, not a slam. There's a lot of experts out there that are saying the same thing they said 10 years ago, right? Milking it for every dollar they can. And there might be some real practical financial advantage to doing that. So I'm not trying to downplay that strategy. There's a real business strategy to some of those, some of those strategies. But, I remember one time, and this was a very humbling moment for me. I'd say it was like at the peak of what I consider a season in my life of business, and my business was like at a peak, so to speak, in terms of income being generated at that point. And somebody said to me, something I want you to think about. Don't congratulate yourself for where you are, right? Think about where you should be based on your ability. And I was like, ooh, it was like gut punch, right? It was like sucker punch. It was like, oh, wow, yeah, that's actually a really, really good statement or thought. Right?
Yeah, value is not always in terms of money, right? Money's not the ultimate judge of your success, right? Money's not the ultimate judge of your success, right? It's
money. Well, whatever it is, right? Money, like notoriety, like whatever. Yeah. Pick the X. It doesn't really matter. That's not the point, right? It's exactly. It's okay. Where should you be right now? Right? Where could you be, right? If you weren't holding on so tight to that, whatever it is, whatever that was, right? So, okay. And I'm not going to go through this. Everyone's done the whole 10,000 hours. I don't care. I don't actually care about the whole 10,000 hours because I've met a lot of people who've done 10,000 hours and they suck because they just did 1 hour repeated 10,000 times. It doesn't matter, right? Right? 10,000 hours is just a number, right? I think if we're going with this kind of focus on, there's a principle out of weightlifting called progressive overload, right? So I started lifting heavy 2 years ago, like doing heavy weightlifting. And now put things in perspective. I'm right now 129 pounds.
Wow.
So 5'5", I'm 129 pounds. When I started lifting, I couldn't deadlift the bar plus, so what, 95 pounds, right? I couldn't deadlift 95 pounds, which is pathetic. I couldn't bench press, I couldn't even bench press 80. It was pretty bad. Anyway, week, right? But I found a super simple program and I committed to doing nothing more than following the program to the letter and tracking, right? No emotion involved. I literally recorded every single workout that I did. And what I was trying to do was increase the volume incrementally over time, whether it was by doing an extra set or adding a little bit more weight. I wasn't going for any world record strength things. I just wanted to get stronger, right? Well, let's fast forward 2 years now, right? So I'm 129 pounds, right? My last workout, which was just yesterday, I deadlifted for reps, 285 pounds, right? I don't know what my 1 rep maximum are. I don't even care, right? Right. And it took me 2 years to get to that point, right? Now, could I have done it faster? Maybe, but I'm 42. I don't want to hurt myself. So I'm more than cautious in terms of doing things slowly, right? And it's the same with building any kind of skill. It's not about, right? Like you can't weekend warrior any of this stuff, right? You can't salvage a marriage by jumping in and say, I'm going to just give you all my time on a Saturday. It's not going to work. Right? You can't get in shape by jumping in and spending 8 hours at the gym on a Saturday and nothing else any other time. You can't build skills of proficiency as a designer or a user of your instrument by only doing it, right? It's about consistency over time, right? And right, so and being willing, right? Here's the thing, and this is something that we have a hard time with, I think, just as a culture. And when I say culture, I'm talking about our specific vocation. Not a lot of us have the patience to allow ourselves to do the learning, right? We've got this very kind of fictitious line in the sand drawn in our mind at the point we think we should have something under our belt, right? And if we miss that line in the sand, then we kind of get discouraged and throw our hands up in the air and start blaming everything other than ourselves for why that did not work, right? And do we have the patience to go the distance on the journey, right? Is the question we have to ask ourselves, right? So forget about the 10,000 hours, right? 10,000 hours is honestly, it's good advice to the person starting off who wants to break into the field. Every single one of you is getting paid to write software right now, right? That's a huge blessing, right? It's a massive blessing, right? You're getting paid to write software. You might be working at organizations where you can't write software the way you want, right? Which means what? It means, can you figure out a way to slice your days up so you can actually start building projects in the way you want without, that help you build the skill set that you actually want to start using on the job, right? So yeah, so this is my reference to the 1 hour repeated 10,000 times, right? I think willingness to practice the same thing for 10,000 hours is a mental disorder, right? So okay, so right, so this is right. I think I'm at the end here. I hope I'm at the end. Yes, I am. Right, so deliberate, right, consistent and challenging. So one of the things I talk to people about when we're doing, like when I start with a lot of my interns, I'll actually say to them, okay, what's a goal you have, right? And I'm going to use the workout analogy once again, because here's what a lot of people say. I want to get in better shape. Okay. That's a garbage goal. Okay. And the reason I say it's a garbage goal is you can't track it. You can't measure it. You can't verify a year from now that you've actually gotten in better shape, right? What's one you hear Dubs say all the time? I want to be a better developer next year. I hear that all the time. Okay, I want to be a better developer next year. How the heck can you quantify to me that you're a better developer, right? How about rephrase the statement, right, to something that's actionable, right, measurable, and verifiable, right? So if instead of saying I want to be a better developer, flip the statement and now say, I want to commit to doing 3 code katas a day every week for the next year, right? It's trackable, measurable, verifiable, and I guarantee the product coming out of that 1 year of doing that, you're going to be a better developer, right? You'll be a better developer, 100%, right? If you say to yourself, I want to become a better typer, touch typist, great, not actionable. If you say to yourself, for the next year, I want to increase my word per minute speed by 3 words a minute per month, every month, right? Meaning at the end of the year, I should be 36 words per minute faster than I am right now. That is something you can track, you can measure, you can verify, right? Because if you don't come up with concrete, right? If you don't come up with concrete things that you can actually, right? Why is it good to be concrete? Because you can rally somebody else in, just like Adam was saying, rally somebody else in to help you stay accountable with your goals. Because no one can help you with the, I want to be a better developer goal in an actionable way. All they can say is, do you feel like a better developer today? Right? Yeehaw. Right? But if somebody says, like if Daniel comes to me and says, okay, JP, I'm committed to doing 3 code katas a day, right, for the next year, or 3 code katas a week for the next year, all I have to say to him is send me your repo link. Okay, send me your repo link. And if I see that as a day, right, if every 2 days, I should be seeing pull requests come in. If I don't see a pull request come in on a day that I'm expecting a pull request, that is something that I can now hold him accountable for. I can help him hit his goal, right? And that's why it pays to actually take a little bit of time to do some finessing of that high-level statement. All right, and I put these on here because these are kind of related to another kind of presentation, but we're talking about kind of some resources for kind of improving. This was kind of improving like the base dev skills. Right, one of the things I did, I've been using Lumosity for years. Right, so you talk about start a day type activities. It's get up, right, get ready, spend some time with the Lord, spend some time on Lumosity, usually 10-15 minutes, right? Just brain training exercises to get warmed up, right? Depending on the day, right? 10 to 20 minutes of a code kata, right? Completely unrelated to things that I'm working on, usually with different languages that I'm currently working with, right? And then transition out of that into regular day-to-day, right? 20 minutes, guys, is just enough time to get something going, not enough time for you to discount not doing it, right? If I said an hour every day, it would be easy for me to fall into a trap where I can say that I just don't have time for that. Okay, you are gonna have to really come up with a really, really good, more than likely bogus reason why you don't have 20 minutes to spare. Right? So pick the time, whatever it is. Right? So, okay. So let's go to tools. Let's start talking about some of these
Just
things,
on that,
right? So
just on that note,
oh.
JP, sorry, just want to point out again that Krzysztof has done a really good example of that by doing his 5-minute equivalent of a kata, I guess, but his practice of doing an event model and an event source system every day for the last 7 months now, I think.
There you go. Yeah.
And so he's been a textbook example of what you're talking about to master a specific topic and get his understanding and practice to a level that will in a year be a significantly different place than when he started. So it's really it's really good to point out examples where people are doing that and are successful in following that recommendation.
Okay. So I've got kind of like a high level set of notes going to kind of walk through, right? So principles, right? So I already talked about the Pragmatic Thinking and Learning book, right? And Pragmatic Programmer. And there's a ton of principles that come out of the Pragmatic Programmer that I'm not going to belabor by, echoing verbatim, but I want to highlight 3 that have really been kind of very important to me. Learn a shell, okay? Learn a shell. I'm primarily on Unix-based environments, right? So I'm, I'm coming, right now I'm running Ubuntu. But whether it was Windows, OS X, or Linux, I've always strived to, again, personal choice, stay in the shell as much as I can, right? So that kind of orientation heavily influences the way that I look at tools that I bring into the fray. Right? I'm always looking in terms of, does this play well with my command line? Right? Can I automate this tool from my command line? Does it expose good, clean, human readable configuration? Right? If you've ever read, and I recommend, I didn't put it on here, but again, I'm going to have to update my book list and just send a link to it. But there's a really good book that I think, even if you're not a Unix guy, there's a book called The Art of Unix Programming. And there are design principles in that book that hold 100% today, right? Build small tools that do one thing and one thing well. Make them highly composable with other tools. And right, there's a lot of design practices that come out of that book that if you can get past the, there's some, interesting language in the book that has a, very, kind of, but it's a great book, right? And, so that whole aspect of thinking in terms of, these small tools that do one thing and one thing well. I'm only going to, right, I've been doing automation and, personal automation for my workbench for, years, right? And it would be, the only thing that would serve for me to kind of sit up here and just kind of have screens flashing left, right, and center would be to have you sitting there being like, oh my goodness, wow. Wouldn't be a lot of learning, right? I'm going to just focus on a couple of key concepts and tools and show you how I kind of use them in a, albeit slow down fashion, just for the sake of actually catching it on Zoom. And just talk about the principles behind them and what you can do. Really, a lot of this is what you can do when you have a set of very small focused tools. And the only thing limiting how you use the tools is your ability to actually think creatively about how to chain them together. Right? So I'm not actually going to go through an exhaustive list of what I have on my machine in terms of automation stuff, because we could be here for weeks, right? But what I can do is talk about a couple of really simple tools, right? With no personal bias as to why you should choose that one tool over the other, because I'm saying this is what I use, this is why I use it. Right? I'm not about to get into any religious wars in terms of editors and all that other stuff, right? That's a whole other, right? But so learn a shell, right? Learn a shell, learn an editor, and automate. Now here's the thing. I'm not going to go in depth into any of those points because I really want to walk through this hardware section really briefly. Right, so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go to the, I'm going to bring this up, right, just so you can see. That was one of my first keyboards, the data hand, okay, right? Looks a little wonky, right? Like it's literally a completely split, right? There's only 5 finger positions, right? You can't put your fingers outside of those key wells, right? Now, how, right, coming from a QWERTY-based layout on a standard flat keyboard, how much of a brain shift do you think it was to jump onto this device?
I remember, JP, this brings me back to, it's funny that you bring this up because 2 years before we met, I forced myself to learn Dvorak. And so I know this mind shift. And I did it on the job.
Yeah. That goes with the whole let yourself be uncomfortable.
I was
mindset,
very
right?
uncomfortable and had very long days, but I learned it very quickly.
Right. So this was by far the most incredible keyboard I've used to date.
They're looking like joysticks.
Yeah. The thumbs have toggles on them. So you see that the thumbs have toggles on them. So you can actually, that's how you switch layers on that keyboard. Right? You can actually switch layers by flipping the toggles up and down. Right? So imagine, right, you can actually and we're going to talk about this when I talk about the keyboard that I'm on right now, but you could literally, the nice thing about layer-based systems, which in my opinion they're the kind of creme de la creme of where you start talking about practical automation at the keyboard level. If your keyboard doesn't support a layer-based key system, you're missing out on a lot of opportunity for automation that stays with your hardware, right? So when we talk about hardware, we have to make the point that anything that I'm going to show today is only possible because I have a keyboard that lets me use a layer system where the layer mappings stay with the device, right? So I can literally unplug my keyboard, take it to another computer, plug it in, and it's going to work identically. Right? No messing around with drivers, no messing around with anything, right? So, so what does that mean from a practical perspective? If I've got a layer-based system, right? So as an example, for those of you who I can't empathize with Adam because I never learned Dvorak, but if I'm on a QWERTY system and I put my fingers on home row, right? I can keep my fingers on home row, switch to a different layer where my home row becomes all of my number keys. Switch to a different layer where my home row becomes all my function keys. Switch to a different layer where my right hand home row becomes all of my programmatic symbols, parentheses, curly braces, square brackets. Switch to another layer where, and so on and so forth, right? I'm using a 32-layer keyboard system right now. I'm using 10 of those layers right now, right? I'm actively using 10 of those layers, right? So think about that. On a regular keyboard, right? I can't even remember how many keys are on a regular keyboard. You've got N keys times 32. Think about that, right? N keys times 32. Now couple that with every single layer, each key on a specific layer, you could choose to not necessarily actually just have it remap to another key. You might actually bind macros to that key in that layer. So you can literally have, when you press that key on that layer, it can actually run a command sequence. So just think about that, right? Just think about what that opens up in terms of possibilities.
Oh yeah, I mean, I can replace immediately very common things like LS, and instead of having to set up an alias on every single computer, exactly. I can do, my my default for listing a directory is ls-trlah8,
Yep.
right? To
Yep.
list by new, latest
Yep.
file changed, have a one-line readout, and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
I could totally see having that as something on one layer that I just know my thumb goes here, my left pinky goes here, and it's done, right?
Yeah. Right. So that's that one. Right. So we'll go now to the Kinesis. Right. So let's go this one. We'll go to Kinesis. Right. So, oh, not that one. Oh yeah, this one. Okay. So this was my one after. One after the data hand was the Kinesis. And I actually used this one for years. This is a very comfortable keyboard, but the big concession that I had to make going from the data hand to this keyboard is the Advantage only supported essentially one functional layer with 250 programmable macros. Now that sounds great, but once you've actually gotten accustomed to a layer-based system, you don't realize how hand-tied you are not having a layer-based system. It's enough that you realize that having macros on its own doesn't actually account for it, right? So I went from there, right, and we'll go back, right, and then from there, went to, let's go with the Ergo. So this, oh, not this one. Did I not put it in there? Thought I put it in. Oh yeah, it's right there. Oh, I put the, okay, well, that's fine. I'll put it on here. So let's go to Ergo Docs. What is happening here? Oh yeah, there we go. I'll go like that. It's because I'm in the present. Okay, so I'll just go over here so you can see it. So I switched to this keyboard recently, right? So if I go to the Ergo Docs, and I'll show you what this keyboard actually looks like. Right, so the Ergo Docs this will show you the picture of what my current keyboard actually looks like. So you can see the 10 layers on the top there, right? Base is 0, symbols is 1, mouse is 2, I3 is 3, F keys are 4, layer 5 is a jump layer. My Vim layer is layer 6, my Tmux layer is layer 7, my numbers layer is layer 8, my hardware layer is layer 9, and my space layer, which I'll talk about in a bit, is layer 10. Right, so this is my the way my keyboard is visually mapped, right? The
what's the meh? That sounds
sorry,
pretty funny. There's a meh.
Oh yeah, meh. That's for Linux. That's a
I don't care about these. I don't care about these commands. Meh.
Yeah, meh it's an impossible combination. So
oh, okay.
It's an impossible combination that you can then pair with anything else, right?
Oh,
so for me, it's Control Shift. It's command, right? It's Control Shift Command. Like it's 5 keys, and then you can pair those with anything else.
Oh, I
right?
see.
So it's meh plus whatever, right? So this is what I'm on right now. So this is what it actually looks like, right? This is the Ergo Docs Easy. So this is a 32-layer keyboard system, and going from the Kinesis to this, the immediate thing that I noticed was my hands and wrists had gotten incredibly comfortable with, and I'm going to use comfort here in a positive way, with the concave layout of the Kinesis. It's the most comfortable key wells that I've ever used. Going to the Ergo Docs from that, going back to a flat-based keyboard, you become highly accustomed to how much extra pressure your hands are using to pull off the same things. Enough so that you're going to laugh, right? After 2 weeks on the Ergo Docs, I put in an order for one of these. Right? Wow. It's a 3D printed dactyl manuform, right? So it's got the same concave key well as the Kinesis. It's a little bit more tilted, right? But supports the same 32-layer key mapping system, but it's completely open source. So I can literally go and download the 3D models, right? Print them in, right? Send them to a 3D printer, have them printed off, right? Wire it up, and the creme de la creme of all of this becomes this little piece of code here. So QMK, right? QMK is it's a set of software. It's a software spec for hardware. And QMK is basically a C-based mapping system for your keyboard, right? It can control everything, right? You can control the, right, when I press this, this is what should happen. When I press this, I want a LED sequence to light up. Fully programmable, right? And so this is basically where I have kind of now settled, right? Is I have a QMK based, right, C based key mapping configuration that gets flashed onto the hardware, right? So the nice thing about that is it's completely version controlled, right? My entire keyboard remapping scheme is all.
But the important thing is that it's burnt. It's actually burnt on. So that means when you carry your keyboard, it's not a matter of something running on that machine. It's just sitting there, literally inside the keyboard. You go and plug it in to another computer, and you get the exact same thing.
Yeah. Oh, sorry, my niece. Yeah, exactly, Adam. Right. So yeah, it's right. So the main thing is it's is exactly that, right? So for me, the combination of now here's the cool thing, right? When you talk about, right, so picture this, right? So I mentioned the 32-layer key system, right? And again, I'm trying to mention these things so you can kind of get an idea, just get your brain starting to think about how you could use some of these things, right? Now, with things like, any of you who have used Vim or Emacs have the concept of a leader key. You can use a leader key, right? I'm big on, I'm going to talk about in a minute, I'm big on not memorizing shortcuts. Personally, I hate shortcuts, right? And my personal driver to not learn shortcuts is what pointed me in the direction of, from a very early phase, getting into essentially mnemonic-based keyboard traversal.
Because I remember you were, for people's history, when we met, it was all about IntelliJ key binding, so that it was more like chords, like playing a piano, to basically having the control alt N, etc. So that when you're doing a refactoring, you'd basically hit a chord and boom, it happened. So it was kind of like playing an instrument to do that. But
so I'll tell you one thing, and you wouldn't know this because we never talked about this. All those times that I did those presentations when I was coding in Visual Studio and ReSharper, and people were blown away by how fast I was coding, right? I never once pulled off a key chord shortcut or a shortcut. And that's the thing that I want that you wouldn't have known. What was actually running behind the scenes when I was running on Windows, I actually had a software layer running on auto hotkey where I would enter a mnemonic entry state. It would wait for a key sequence, so find usages was FU. As soon as I tapped FU, it would run.
That's an unfortunate.
Well, no, you know what I mean, all right? Yeah, I know, right? But again, mnemonics are they're devices to remember.
Right.
So as an example, right? Like when I
because just for people's background, like those Control Alt N was for the name of a class, right? And there was some like Control Alt P and was introduced parameter, Control Alt V was introduced variable, Control Alt M was introduced method or extract method or whatever.
Yeah.
So they had the makings of the mnemonics, but I think they were bound to what was allowed within other shortcuts, right? Yeah. So I'm guessing what you're doing is essentially saying that it's faster or more natural for a human to have key sequences instead.
Well, for me, it was about having if I could use a mnemonic that made sense for me and actually write that as configurable mapping that again was version controlled, then I knew that wherever I was in the system, if I wanted to, as an example, if I wanted to quit my current window, right? And I'll go back to Windows. If I wanted to quit the current window that I was in, I would switch into my mnemonic entry state, right? Transition to window mode, right? Which was W. Mm-hmm. And then X was my mnemonic for exit. So it was always enter mnemonic state and then transition through we'll call them layers, right? This is pre-layer keyboard system, right? And right, so what does it look like? So as an example, right? So if I go over here to, everyone can see my desktop here, right?
Yep.
So if I open up, right? If I open up Chrome, right, as an example, what does it look like? So I'll talk about tools, right? So here's one tool. I use a tool called i3 for window management, but I use it probably very different than most people use it, right? Because it super supports this concept of a mnemonic-based, right, system. And again, I'll do it slow just so I can walk through what's happening. But here I am. I want to close this window down. Now, I could try to remember what the shortcut is that i3 binds for killing windows. I could go and reconfigure i3 to bind it to a shortcut that makes more sense to me, or I could actually use the concept of mnemonic traversal, right? So what I'll do is I'm going to enter my mnemonic entry state. Now watch the bottom of the screen. See what's happening there?
Yeah.
App mode, tasks, i3, lock, mouse, run, S for workspace, W for window, G for settings. I'm going to enter window mode. So I'm not pressing shortcuts, guys. This is I don't have to hold keys down, right? This is literally a state machine, right? You're modeling transitions at your keyboard level as a state machine, right? So here I am. I want to close this window down, which means I'm probably going to want to go into window mode. So if I go W, I'm in my window mode now. And I know for me, because it's just muscle memory now, that if I'm in window mode, I just have to type X now to close that window. And it's closed, right? Right, so imagine that for pretty much every activity that you do on your system, right? Where it's a matter of putting the state machine in the right state, then executing an action. There's no need to hold down key chords or remember key chords or anything like that, right? Right, so when I'm on here, right, here I am. Like, let's say I want to, let's say I want to open up Chrome again, right? So as an example, Chrome is open on my pane number 6, right? Pane number 6, it's open. I want to move this to pane number 1, right? The mnemonics that I use, right? The domain model, because we're still talking domain models here. There's a domain model for your system, right? I've got windows, I've got spaces, right? That's my domain, right? For the domain of window management, you're talking about windows and spaces, right? So if I want to do this, if I want to move my window number 6, right? Sorry, I want to move this window, which is currently on space number 6, to space number 1. Start mnemonic entry mode again. I'm going to say window. I want to move it. So the mnemonic for that would be M. Window move. S for space. And then my whole home key layer has now switched to now A through G is 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. HAKL semicolon is, right, 6, 7, 8, 9, 0. So when I want to move this window now to the first, I just have to press A, which is 1, and it's gone. It's over there now, right? So if I go to 1 now, you're going to see that it's on the right-hand side of that window because I'm tiling right now, right? And if I want to move it back, right, when I move to space 6, right, you're going to see that it's already back on space 6. No shortcuts. Here's the thing. In the beginning, when you put your state machine in play, oh, you want your phone? Right, when you put your state machine in play, just like learning the touch type, there'll be you won't get proficient and fast until it becomes muscle memory, right? No touch typer or automation, like keyboard automation junkie becomes proficient until 90% of their activities become muscle memory, right? So it's not like I actually have to sit there. Like, did I need to look at the bottom of that screen and know that it was WMS digit to move it? Not at all. I was doing that for your benefit, right?
It's sometimes hard to remember the muscle memory. I find that a lot of your muscle memory stuff, especially when you're doing, a lot of automation, when someone asks you how did you do that, you don't even know. You don't even know. You say, don't even know. I don't remember.
Yeah. Exactly, and that's a good thing, right? The good thing. The reason that's a good thing is anything that can be done via muscle memory is brain cycles that get freed up for you to just focus on problem solving.
Exactly, and I think there's a very important point which I had a lot of arguments with programmers and technologists, where they say, I don't need to be faster. And it's not about speed. It's
not
about
about
where
speed.
your mind is, right?
It is not
the
about speed.
huge benefit, of course, the side benefit that's really overplayed is the incredible proficiency and speed that you do get. But it's exactly what you said, JP, is that once you're, on a very shallow level of understanding the chords, once they're committed to memory, I don't care how badly the mnemonic was, I just know that that pattern extracts a method, right?
Yeah.
And then I don't care. It's like, oh, what did you do to extract the method? It's like, I don't remember.
Yeah.
Let me check.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
But yeah,
Right.
you're
So
thinking about the problem instead of typing. Exactly.
that's it. Exactly. Right. You're thinking about the problem instead of typing. And that's, so the benefit, right. And, going back to exactly what you said, Adam, right. For the people that belabor oh, that guy just thinks too much, right. This is not about being able to, like, I mean, right now I'm working with a guy, like my tech lead on the team that I'm working with right now. Without blinking, he types at a consistent 125 words a minute, right? Which it's faster than I can type, right? Like I'm on a new keyboard scheme right now, so I've dropped from my resting rate of 100 down to about 70, which I'm still fine with, right? It's not a big, because like Adam says, it's not about how fast you can type, it's about how much of your brain cycles are being spent dealing with problems that don't need to be problems.
Yeah.
Right. So, that's what automation is about. It's about, these are things that you need to do. Do you need to do them? Right. They need to be done. Do you need to do them? Right. So the whole aspect of focusing on automation is less about becoming an automation wizard as much as freeing up your time. Right. Freeing up your time to focus on the things you actually want to be focusing on. Right. So,
one quick question, JP, sorry to interrupt. How often do you go and review your, let's say your shell history, just to see what opportunities you have for automating something else, or do you do it more on an as needed basis?
So I'll show you what I have. Funny enough, I kept it on here on purpose, right? Do you see what one of my active sessions is? So this is a practice that I've been doing for years.
Automation journal.
Journal,
yeah, you mentioned this, right? Automation journal.
So
okay,
my automation journal. Right,
you didn't describe what you did with it, though. Yeah. You said you kept one.
So let me tell you how I use this, right? So every week, right? It's only Tuesday, so it makes sense there's only one thing on this. Every week, when I run into friction, right? I am very cognizant to, at bare minimum, take the 10 seconds it takes to switch to my automation journal and add that friction point as a potential to do, right? This is followed by one practice, and I've been doing this for years, right? I add the item to my automation journal. So anytime I feel a friction point and I think to myself, and you've all done this, the second you hear yourself saying, oh man, I wish I had something that could do this, or I wish this didn't work like that, or insert whatever phrase you want, but it usually is prefixed with something that you hit, some friction point that you had, or something that you're doing over and over again. And if you hear yourself saying, oh man, I can't believe I have to do this again, go to your automation journal and write it down, right? And what I do is at the end of the week, on Fridays, I do a 30-minute automation kata where I take one of the items on that list and move it to an automation script.
How do you remind yourself to then next week use the automation when you come to that friction point again? And then how many of these things are not repeatable because maybe you're using a tool for one project that you don't have to use maybe in a couple of months again?
So let me give an, yeah, okay. So the thing is just like the muscle memory, when you introduce a new automation thing, you have to kind of purpose to use it. You kind of have to go out of your way to remind yourself to use it. Right? Because otherwise it won't become part, right? It won't become part of it. So one of the super simple things that I do is literally switch to my my shell history and move those commands right down to the bottom. Right? So they're right there, right? Whether I like it or not, they're going to be the first things that come up in my history as, oh, I just ran this recently, right? I should probably think about running it again. Right. So it's more of a practice. It's not so much it's actually a lot less work than you think.
Yeah, no, I'm just thinking that people are forgetful, and especially if you're doing it on a Friday and then you have, family obligations or vacations or whatever trips over the weekend and you're back, it might be the you know, you might need some sort of discipline to reintroduce reintroduce it to your thing. But I'm guessing you'll have it if it's painful enough what you're automating, you'll go back to using what you're supposed to use.
So
And
let me
I
give
have
an
more
example.
technical questions about this
Oh yeah,
too.
go for it, Dan.
Sorry,
Yeah,
Dan.
I've
I
got a
don't want to
question.
monopolize. Go
Yeah,
ahead.
go for it.
You know, first of all, this is pretty much strange to me. This is really new. My question is this: can I do most of this automation on regular keyboards?
No.
Great.
No. And so here's the thing, Daniel. Like you can do a
Sad
you can
answer.
do a lot. You can do a
Pretty
lot
much
on
sad.
you can do a lot on a regular keyboard, right? Like a lot of all the scripting you see that I'll be working through, a lot of it can, right? But what I'm saying is, this is what I'm saying. You're going to waste a lot of cycles trying to do the same thing on a regular keyboard. That's the bottom line. Right? Yes, you can do, I'll say you could probably even do 90% of it on a regular keyboard. It's not going to be worth your time.
Oh,
right?
oh, I get
For a
the
lot
point.
of that, for the stuff that is difficult, for you to try to replicate the stuff that's difficult on a regular keyboard, in my personal opinion, is not going to be good investment of time. Right?
Yeah.
So the thing is what I'm saying is, you know, and again, take this for what it's worth, but is if you're not using a layer-based keyboard, you're missing out on massive opportunities for automation that you can't even fathom.
So at one point on that note, is there a good transition? Because, you know, I think that's the biggest question on everyone's mind is like, is it an all or nothing? I can't like stop being productive overnight. And
where do I start?
So let me qualify this.
There's one more thing, JP. You had foot pedals. You missed out foot pedals.
No, not anymore. I don't have foot pedals now. I used to have foot pedals. Yeah.
You missed that from your history. I want to know about it.
I did used to have foot. Yeah, and I used to use the foot pedals primarily for the mouse keys, like for the mouse buttons.
Really?
Right. So I would use my feet were my left and right mouse click. Right. I know, kind of hilarious, right? So
it's like a drum, you know.
Yeah, and right, because again, right, even though it might seem a little pedantic, if I go on with the kind of mindset of I have to force myself, and this is kind of what got me into the practice in the first place. So going back to your question, Daniel, I should probably rephrase the statement. When I'm on my laptop, laptops don't have a layer-based keyboard system.
Exactly.
Right. So the thing is when I'm on my laptop, I'm working at about 90% capacity of what I can do when I'm on my desktop. Right. So that 90%, I shouldn't say it's not worth it. It's still worth it. So I probably should retract that statement. Right. It is still worth it. There's just some things that I cannot do simply on my laptop that I can on this keyboard. Right. Which means what? Can I still do it? Yes. The path to do it is much longer. Right?
What are some of those examples?
So as an example, right? Yeah. So here's an example, right? So I'm in Vim right now, right? So I'm in Vim, like that's, you know, I use Vim, I toggle between Vim and Spacemacs. And, you know, simple example is like my escape key, okay? I just want E to be my escape key, right? Like I don't want it, right? Well, that's pretty much impossible to do on a non-layer keyboard because you can't remap E practically without saying that you're just not going to type E anymore. Right? You know what I mean?
The most common letter in the language.
Right? Like you can't, right? So what would you do, right? In that scenario, right? The tool that I use when I'm on my laptop, right? So I'll go on my laptop. There's a tool that I use, and actually I don't even have it installed on here, which makes sense because it wouldn't make sense to run on this thing. On my laptop, I run a software called AutoKey, right? AutoKey is basically, if you've ever seen like AutoHotkey or Hammerspoon on OS X, it's a scripting layer for keyboard automation, right? And so what I can do is I can bind certain key sequences to scripts that run in AutoKey, and they do the same thing that are programmed onto my board on my layer-based key system. Okay, so it's more work. Yeah, it's not transferable work, right? Because you notice I don't even have AutoKey running. If I showed you my laptop right now and I brought that thing up and typed AutoKey would have been the first thing on the list, right? So that's how you can, right? So what happens is when I Command E on my layer-based key system. Command switches me to my jump layer. E becomes the escape key, right? When I'm on my laptop, my command, or we'll say, you know, we'll say control, right? The meta key or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
Meta E triggers an auto key script that sends the escape code. Right? So now the problem with the scripting based approach, when you're doing things, especially if you get up to a level where you're typing very quickly, sometimes the problem with the scripting based approaches where they're not hardware signals being sent is you can out type the script. All of a sudden you've got letters getting dropped, you've got sequences that aren't getting sent, and so it'll feel a little less fluid sometimes if you're a super.
So the software solution is not as good usually because it's at a driver layer.
Yeah, it's not. Sometimes you could run into issues with it, right? It'll probably it could take a while to hit the window with it, but you will feel. Let's say sometimes you'll feel an element of sluggishness about it. Right?
So here's another question. I love it, and I think the idea that started a lot of this is key travel, right? Like having to move too far, because you gave the example of escape, and that's too far away on a traditional keyboard to really have really good fluidity. And even if you're a touch typist, you know, depending on whether you're on your laptop or on a full-size keyboard, you have to check with your eyes sometimes to where you are because of misalignments, right? A lot of people going from a desktop keyboard to a laptop keyboard, they find that the further they move away from home row, the worse their productivity is because of the difference.
Yeah.
So I think point number one is find automation and typing where your fingers remain on home row 100% of the time if possible.
Yeah.
So that means, okay, if someone's transitioning to one of these more ergonomic keyboards that actually do have the layers and are programmable, is there now a path where they don't have to drop down to 0 productivity or 20% productivity and start to introduce that keyboard and then start to introduce the levels of automation and other things on a less disruptive level because they don't want to get fired?
Yeah. So if we talk about progression path, and my other keyboard is on its way here, but so if you talk about progression path, right? So when you switch to a true split, right? And so this is true split with thumb cluster, right? True split with thumb cluster, right? Forget about the layers, right? If I were going to suggest people embark on this journey, right? I would say switch to a true split and just get comfortable. Like, and actually, like the keyboards that I've shown, pick the Manuform or the ErgoDox, right? Either or, right? And just do nothing more than stick with your QWERTY scheme. Don't add any new layers, right? Just get comfortable typing on that keyboard as normal, right? To the point where you're proficiently typing at the level that you were prior to the switch, and you have not introduced layers yet, right? The nice thing about when you talk about without talking about a progression model, when you switch to something like the ErgoDox or the Manuform, you could literally say, I'm never going to use layers. I just like the comfortability of a massive split. Like, I mean, you think about where my hands are, right? Like on the Kinesis, now that if I ever plug my Kinesis back in and jump on it just out of curiosity, everything feels condensed and scrunched. My shoulders feel tighter, right? Whereas when I'm on my true split, I mean, both sides of the keyboard are outside of my 32-inch monitor, right? They're outside of right? They're as far as I can stretch, so I feel completely open. Right?
It's amazing that people don't even think about that because they never had the experience of that. And it's a reflection on society, how we're shaped by old systems and paradigms that simply because of established momentum in the industry, we don't feel empowered to escape. There's a lesson in what you're saying for a lot of things in society.
Like being forced to use Windows.
Absolutely.
Yeah, but the corollary to that is what, Daniel, is if you've only ever been on Linux, you better spend some time on Windows.
Right?
You know, like, no, I'm serious. Like, because you don't want to be in an echo chamber where you fall into that I'm superior because I'm a Linuxer or an OS Xer or whatever, right? Like, because the reality is, there is some really good tools on the Windows surfaces, like on the Windows layer as well, that you might not have had exposure to. And again, what's the point? The point of transitioning to these, what we'll call, because we're literally talking about shifting paradigms here across the board. We're talking about it in event modeling. If you go from QWERTY to Dactyl, or to QWERTY to Dvorak, you're switching your typing paradigm, right? What's the benefit? The benefit of doing a paradigm shift is the learning that you get going through that process, right? Yeah. That is actually the side effect of going through those things, right? Is what happens to your brain to have to actually go through that process, right? So as an example, right, when we talk about automation, right? So let me give you a practical example here, right? So automate anything that moves, right? I am part of a Slack work group, right? I got 6 work groups that I'm part of. And anytime that I want to step away from the keyboard, now I just commented out a line in my i3 configuration file. And again, I need to reload my configuration, right? So I is my mnemonic for entering i3 mode. I want to reload the entire config. So it's IRR, right? i3 reload, and then for me, R just was something that stuck for me for my entire, right? And then IRS for I reload session, right? So I just did that. That's reloaded my entire config. Now here's the thing. I'm over here. I'm walking away from my desk for 20 minutes, right? I'm walking away from my desk for 20 minutes, right? I want to, right? I want to say, okay, well, I'm going to switch to my work. I'm going to switch to my workspace, right? And I'm going to just say, I want to say that I'm going to be away and back in 30 minutes, right? Now watch what happens here. It's going to switch to Slack. It's going to toggle to each of the groups that I'm in, set my status to away, and set my do not disturb on for 30 minutes, right?
Wow.
Think about how much time that takes if I have to do that for 7 Slack groups every time, right? And I could just be lazy and shut my Slack off. But the thing is if I'm in an environment that's expecting high levels of communication and collaboration, I can't just shut Slack off. I have to let people know that I'm not at my desk for the next 30 minutes, right? The script is done now. Notice every single one of these, right? Back in 30, back in 30, right? Back in 30. Right? And then the inverse to that, when I actually get back to my computer, I can just run back and it'll go and it'll clear my status, switch to each of the groups that I'm a part of, set my status back to active and back on, right? How did that happen? That's not accidental. That's the second I got to more than one Slack group and I had to be like, no, I'm away for 10 minutes and jump, /status, /DND, right? Yes, there's shortcuts for all of it in Slack, but even the shortcuts, that thing that took the computer literally less than a minute to do was me spending at least, and when I had even a larger number of groups, I could take up to 2 minutes.
Yeah, there's another trick to this, and I automated Slack at the very beginning where I used a Python script to join Slack with WeChat, not the WeChat you think, but the actual IRC client on Linux, where you can join them with Slack channels, and there you can do scripting incredibly quickly. Yeah. So in fact, those commands, if WeChat, if I remember correctly, if the / still translates across back to Slack, could actually be done in behind the scenes. So you could actually just go through and script it incredibly quickly. So it'd be a fraction of a second. Yeah. Slack is the thing that's taking a long time. Your automation shouldn't, right? So if you want to do this even faster, JP, you could probably have a WeChat session somewhere on a server where literally sending the same sequence would be instantaneous to all those Slack groups, and you'd have control back without waiting 2 minutes. I can send you my week. I can send you my
send me a message to that, and I'll add it to the automation journal for the week.
Well, I just thought you might appreciate something that will be even faster.
Yeah,
because I can see that you're
always do.
Level.
Well, the only reason is because if you had that many Slack groups, and you have to wait 2 minutes for them to give you control back for the time to say that you're back. Yeah, that's 2 minutes you could have used for something else.
Yeah, no, that's good. Yeah, no, I love that. So that's awesome. Send me that, because I'll probably add that to my journal for the week. So
2 minutes shaved off. I contributed something to JP. Yes.
But remember, 2 minutes several times a day over a year is a lot of time.
That is true. Right? Yeah.
And we dismiss these things that that take us 30 seconds, 40 seconds. How many things do we dismiss that we think, well, that was 5 minutes? Okay, like one of the reasons that when I first started consulting, one of the things that people did not enjoy about me is any contract that I would go into, I would have them run. We would, as a unit, we would run Rescue Time or Time Snapper as a group for 2 weeks. And at the end of 2 weeks, everyone had to show their reports as to where they were spending their time. And people were mind boggled at how much time they were wasting, that they didn't realize they were wasting because they had become deadened to it, right? So the thing is it's not the big things. It is exactly like Adam said, it's this death by 1,000 cuts. Right? It's those small little concessions that we make about, oh, that was only 5 minutes. Yeah, it was only 5 minutes, not a big deal, right? And then we discount taking the time to do some simple automation because we convince ourselves that spending 30 minutes for something that only takes 5 minutes doesn't make sense. But it's only going to take 6 times for that script to pay for itself. And then every time after that, right, is time that you fully get back. Right? So,
JP,
and as we get older, we appreciate time more and more. At least I am.
So this leads to another the thing to think about when you're automating is you're optimizing for your time, your mental space, not the computers. Yeah. For example, you might look at the script that Adam said, and you can make it run faster. But if you type the command, say I'm back at Slack, and then you go to work, and if it takes 2 minutes to execute or 1 second, but you don't care because you're not paying attention, then you're not going to get anything from automating that.
Yeah.
But if you're waiting for it to finish, then you get time back. So it's really, if I can get the command, bang, it goes, and it doesn't matter to me how long it takes. I can trust that it takes, and I don't have to watch it.
Yeah.
Then it's done.
Yeah.
If I'm waiting for it.
Yeah.
And I'm using my brain space, waiting for it, watching, so I can be alert when it happens. Yeah. I can't go off and think about something else. That's where the cost is.
Yes, 100%. Right. So in the context of this example, and it's perfect, right? And Adam's right. Like when I run my away script, I literally run it and I just walk away. I'm not even waiting, right? But when I run that back script, you're right. When I run that back script, I'm just sitting, right, waiting for it to finish, interacting with all those windows, and then carry on, right? So that would be the away script. There'd be no benefit to me actually automating that one with WeChat because I don't care. I literally hit enter and walk away from my desk while it's still doing its stuff. Yeah. But the back one is the one that I'd get the benefit on freeing up, on getting my time back because of the modal of the interactive nature of the script. I can't click off.
Which is an interesting. This is an interesting segue into a topic of types of automation, right? Yeah. Because what you're automating is really what you would do manually, and it's what would be entered by keyboard. But we've touched on the topic of automating tasks outside of that and how to go a layer below to make sure that if something loses focus, it's still doing the thing, right? And this is where the keyboard automation has to be kept in check, because if you switch or the system switches focus for whatever reason and there's something being entered in by the keyboard, you'll get obviously errors and potentially bad things happening. Do you do anything extra to make sure that your system is not losing focus? I know in KDE I can change a whole bunch of things to make sure that notifications don't lose focus of the current window, that windowing and focus is kept explicitly in control by the user at the keyboard.
Yeah, it's like my three settings have disabled things like follow, track window, track mouse, use the mouse to track the active window. There's a bunch of things that I disable for that very purpose, so that I can actually ensure that whatever the current target is stays the target irrespective of anything else popping up, right? So we feel like we're kind of almost out of time, but I still got so much I still want to say.
No, go ahead. We still have about 20 minutes. Okay. So don't worry. Right, and if you run over, that's extra bonus. I know you have things to go. So it's really up to you, JP. Get through the material because people will love it if you can, obviously. But we can also come back next week if you want.
Yeah, let me see if I can kind of walk through some kind of workflows here, just to kind of talk about like how some of these things work, these kind of super lightweight tools, right? So. So I wanted to talk about, right, and again, I don't care, right? So the reason I say under editor, I wrote Emacs or Vim. I don't care if you're proficient with IntelliJ or VS Code or all that other stuff. The practical benefit to getting proficient with one of these, what I'll call old school editors, is it forces you to actually start thinking about automation as a first-class citizen. Because you can't really do anything practical or productive without learning how to script them, right? You can't, right? You know, what you'll unfortunately end up doing, which is why a lot of people don't end up getting proficient, is they end up what I'll call plug-in chasing, right?
Yeah.
So they just start installing plugins like they're going out of style, and all of a sudden they don't know how to use their editor anymore. And they're like, oh, Vim sucks, Emacs sucks. And it's because they didn't take the time to feel the pain, right? And learn the bare bones of it and build up, right? Right? They want
it's
to get
one thing
to
to be stubborn and not want to automate or use plugins, you know, and then another to actually go straight to plugins and never understand what you had to do in the first place.
Well, I mean, with the problem with, like, you know, I'm going to call it plugin fatigue, right? You get these guys who see a presentation with a guy using Vim or Emacs and like, this is awesome. They go and install it, and they install, before they've even actually fired it up for the first time, they've installed 20 plugins, right? Good luck. Like, seriously, like, good luck trying to make sense of anything in that environment.
You don't even know which plugin is causing something unexpected.
No idea.
And you're at the most ignorant at that point of knowing any of them. So.
Right. So the scapegoat becomes the, oh, well, this editor sucks. It just can't keep, right? So the thing is, this is not a religious, you should learn Emacs or Vim, right? If nothing else, the side effect, the learning that comes out of learning how to use those tools effectively becomes a high awareness of where automation can fit into your workflow that you might not have had to think about before, right? So shell, right? I use this shell, right? But whatever, pick a shell, it doesn't matter, right?
Speaking of shells, have you looked at Fish Shell? Because it's got a lot more functionality stuff, right?
Yeah, Fish is great. Fish is like they're like, again, that's what I'm saying. I'm outlining what I'm using, right? So
I'm just saying that from the perspective of automation, the functions in Fish Shell are a first-class citizen instead of an add-on or something else like that, and has so when you're writing functions, they're more like C functions, and they have a whole bunch of ready-made variables for everything you want to do in terms of automation. Such as, you know, getting your current, all the stuff that you'd find in Bash variables, and then some that you would need to even give you code completion or whatever else. So it's interesting to see if that's something that's on your radar to look at ZSH.
Honestly,
itself.
like I have not actually considered making the switch yet, just because like so when I switch to if I go to my DevTools environment, my DevTools, I'll call it my DevTools folder, it's got a lot of, like, this whole automation folder, you can see it's pretty big.
Wow.
AutoKey, Brew, Divi, Git.
That's 20 years of automating.
And underneath each of those folders can be subfolders of subfolders and so on and so forth, right? And the thing is, what you'll notice is like these X prefixes. This is back in the day when I didn't have a good fuzzy matching scheme, and I needed a good categorization mechanism, so I knew how to actually start triggering any of my automation scripts. So X became the convention for, execute something, right? And then I could, right? Whereas now I've got fuzzy filtering and fuzzy matching, and it kind of eliminates.
How does the fuzzy filtering work? Sorry, maybe explain that difference.
Yeah, so as an example, so I'll switch to my workspace for a second. So let's say I want to run a timer, right? So workflow item number one, and I honestly think we'll probably need another session to do this justice because we're literally just getting started now. So I apologize for the rambling.
No, it's perfect.
Right. So as an example, I've got my work profile and my personal profile, right? You'll notice that my work browser is open up on my screen 3. My work profile is open up on workspace 4, right? So 3 and 4, and then I actually have another one, depending if I get another client, they'll be on workspace 5. Now, that's specifically to pin the browser to a space for the client. So here's the cool thing, right? So we talk about workflows. With this principle of light tools that do one thing and one thing well, I've never liked the browser-based bookmark system. because it's lost in a SQL-like database. Yes, I can query it. Yes, I know I can write.
But it's proprietary. It's sitting somewhere outside of your control as well.
It's proprietary, and it's the work to just, right? So what did I do? So you're going to notice, right? If I go to, so here's an example. Every single activity that I do, whether it's a project that I'm working on, I'm going to call it a logical unit of work, has a logical session associated with it, right? Now, if I show you my sessions right now, right? So again, this is not a mnemonic, but it's a mnemonic for the command. I want to list my active tmux sessions, right? Tmux, so tmux list session, right? Tmux list session. That'll show my active sessions, right? So again, even the way that I write what I'll call my automation scripts, and the cool thing about how I've got my automation organized is everything lives under that DevTools hierarchy, but everything is recursively sourced and made available, so I can just start typing any of my functions, whether they're functions that are first-class bash or zish functions. They could be files that are Ruby-based or Python-based, right? So that example that I showed you, the not much, right? If I start typing x.not, sorry, no, is it not much? Yeah, I'll have the not much Emacs. If I do timer, right? I'm going to say x.timer. There's my timer H, timer M, x.timer. Those are coming from my automation folder, right? It got recursively, right? It got a recursive find. Each folder that it found one of those scripts in, that folder got automatically added to my path when the shell started. So recursively, every folder under that DevTools folder is in my path now, right? Which means every script that exists in that hierarchy is in my path. And once it's in my path, I can fuzzy match on any of them, right? So when I want to start a Pomodoro timer, right? I want to start a Pomodoro timer for 20 minutes, right? I can say 20 minutes, and oh, that one is, I forgot I haven't switched my XDLG sign, but what that would do, that would open up my browser, right? With e.gg.timer.com for a 20-minute session, right? And right, so this concept of using the browser, right? One of the tools I was mentioning, right, was for a keyboard, right? Keeping your, so again, if the driver is, I want to use the keyboard as much as possible, the mouse as little as possible, right? If you saw where my mouse is right now, it's really awkward to use because my keyboard is split so far out. My mouse is actually sitting on a mouse pad in between the two sections, right? It's literally between, like, I don't know if I can, I probably
I use the Vim plugin for my browser session.
Right,
so I can use keyboards to navigate websites. I rarely use that too. Yeah,
exactly, and that's what I wanted to. Right, so I've used a lot of Vim plugins for browser. This one is by far, in my opinion, save for Pentadactyl on Firefox, which is still, in my opinion, the best of them.
Really?
This one, this one is the best, right? So like CVim, Chromium, Vimium.
Yeah, I'm using Vimium. That's really?
No, Vimium is terrible. Like once you've seen this one, you'll never go back to Vimium. You'll never go back to Vimium.
Really?
Yeah. Okay. Once you've used this one, you'll never use Vimium again. It's called Surfing Keys.
Surfing Keys, and that's for the best one for Firefox, because that's all I use is Firefox.
Oh no, I don't use Firefox anymore. So I shouldn't actually say. If I was on Firefox, I'd still be using Pentadactyl.
Pentadactyl. Okay, yeah. I'm gonna look it up. Thank you.
Yeah. Right. But on Chrome, Surfing Keys. The reason that I love Surfing Keys, right, is Surfing Keys, right, is right. So as an example, I want to open up workflows you do all the time, right? You want to open up a new tab. I want to Google search for, let's go to, right, I'm going to reload my browser and I want to do a Google search for ErgoDocs, right? I just opened a browser tab, did a search for ErgoDocs. Here's my, right, so what could I do on this, right? For those who haven't used like a key-driven browser mechanism before, what are some things you should be able to do, right? Well, I should be able to click a link by, right?
Yeah, that's what I do. I hit F and that's what happens to mine as well. I hit F and then I can do a keyboard sequence.
I should be able to copy a link via the keyboard.
Oh.
Right? So this is now copy link mode. Notice if I hit R now, right? If I hit R now, instead of visiting that link, what's the top of the screen? Copied, https ergodocsez.com.
So how did that happen?
This
When
is
did you hit
scary.
R? Before you got the shortcuts?
No,
Or-
I hit a shortcut to put me in copy mode. Or it's
Oh.
not a shortcut actually. So this is where it gets really cool. So check this out. If I go back to my DevTools, right? So DevTools is my workspace. Notice the workspaces that are currently active: Work, Talk, Mail, DevTools, Automation Journal. DevTools and Mail are almost always open, right? Those are the ones that are pretty much persistent for me. And right, so I'm going to go back to my DevTools, right? And you'll notice this concept, guys, because this is prevalent everywhere. You notice how
Oh, I have a big question about mail after. But go ahead.
yeah, well, I'm going to get to that in a second. Yeah, because
Okay,
that's a big, right? But you'll notice that this concept of filter a list down to the item that I want. This is a recurring tool that I use all over the place on my system, right? It's plugged into pretty much any tool that I use, whether it's Vim, whether it's Zish, whether it's my mail client, it's all there, right? So here's the thing. I want to go to, right, that surfing keys thing that I just mentioned, right? If I go to surfing keys, notice I've got a config.js for my surfing keys file. That's my entire map. It's a literal JavaScript mapping file that can have code in it, that I can remap things. I can, right? It's all code.
Wow.
It's all code,
Wow.
right? So, right, notice that control Y, that was just a funny one. Show me the money, right? And it does a pop up, right? A well-known phrase out of, right? So this is just, right? So again, why is that beneficial? I can literally go in here. Look at that. GT, right? Mnemonic, right? GT maps to the Shift T shortcut. So when I go back over here, what happens when I do GT? Go to tab. That's my mnemonic. GT shows the tabs that I currently have open.
Wow.
I can just narrow filter down the list to get to the one that I want to.
So some of the things that I do in KDE, because I think it has a really smart search, is that if I press, Windows key space, I can type in Gmail. It'll find the tab and take me there.
Yep.
So it kind of has it finds all the windows, and it's
Yep.
smart enough to go into tabs in Firefox
Yep.
as well and find it, right?
Yep.
Do you do any of that kind of integration on the OS level, or do you try to keep it agnostic as much as possible?
No, I do. So I mean, what I do is, I'll show you. Like, what I actually have is, if I go to Myrmidon, right? So this script here. So let's go Myrmidon tasks, right here. So this is a weird one because it doesn't kind of fall in line with the whole. This looks like just a simple. This is just a simple JSON file, right? You notice that it's got names and command pairs, really basic. And the commands are usually just, right? They're literally just commands that will get executed by the shell.
Yep.
Right? But this is pure convenience because sometimes I don't, and again, this is a rare thing, but sometimes I don't want to initiate from the command line, right? So notice what happens here. Look at all these like lock screen, reboot, power down, sleep. These are things that I typically want to be able to do without necessarily having to be in an active terminal session, right? So what I'll do here is, how do I trigger this? I go into task mode, right? See that D for tasks?
Yeah.
All that tasks does is parse this configuration file, and it just displays them as a list of things that I can then trigger.
Oh,
Right?
what's displaying that?
It's called Rafi.
Okay.
Rafi. It's a very simple, yeah. And I use Rafi for a ton of stuff. So we'll get in, because you notice that I'm using Rafi as that. I use Rafi as my app launcher, right? Same tool, just repurposed, right? One little tool that knows how to do one thing. What's the one thing it knows how to do well? It knows how to display a list of items with potential icons and filter them down.
Okay.
In a graphical way. That's what it knows how to do well, right? It doesn't try to be, and then with what you said there, Adam, right? You notice if I go into app mode, I've got launch in Windows. If I do W for Windows, Rafi's going to come up again with my active windows that are currently, and it will switch to the space that thing is on when it's activated, if I needed to do that. I actually don't use that one very much. So like this particular one, I don't use very much. Right. So as an example, right. So that concept of, I said like, so let me switch back to my workspace for a second, right? And I'm going to start my bookmarks workspace. Fired in the background, launched a new session, right? Let me switch to that workspace because I don't ever make the session active unless I explicitly go to it. Notice I've got my bookmarks as plain text files. So here's the cool thing about having it as plain text files. Version controlled. I can literally share them as a repo. I can look at them. So here's some personal ones, right? Timer, banking, card, bell, right? I've got my programming ones, right? How things work, website. Notice I'm not necessarily committing to a certain scheme. I'm using markdown format for one of them. I'm using just plain text for another. It doesn't really matter as long as I can easily read it. But here's the cool thing. The neat thing about having it like that is now, right, instead of having to synchronize histories and do all that other stuff, because I'm primarily spending my time from the command line, right, I'll go to my work. I want to open a browser bookmark. What do you think my mnemonic is for open browser bookmark?
BB, browser bookmark?
It's actually, yeah, good one. It's OBB, open browser bookmark.
Oh, okay.
Right, open browser bookmark, right? Again, so a lot of my mnemonics follow literally the verbatim sentence structure of the activity I'm trying to do, right? So when I say open browser bookmark, what does it do? I'll hit enter. Filter list. Which bookmarks do you want to look through, right? I want to do my programming one, right? So programming is the set of bookmarks I want to open from. Which bookmark do you want to open? Right? So just chain in, right? I want to open up the one on semantic commit messages, right? The last tab that I had active was my personal tab, right? The last tab that I had active was my personal tab. So as soon as I hit this, it's going to jump. And there it is in my personal browser, right? Now, here's the cool thing about that. If I'm on a work, right? And actually what I need to do here, let me switch back to DevTools, Regolith, and yeah, so I just literally changed my config, reloaded my session, reloaded my config, right? Really quick, right? And what happens now, the cool thing about that is, let's say that I happen to be—
What did you change? I missed it. You were
yeah, I know. Right? So I literally just, all I did was I just uncommented my workspace back and forth.
Okay.
Right? That's all and then because I uncommented it, I had to reload my session and my config. Right? But again, that was the muscle memory part taking over there. Right? So,
okay.
So here I am. So I want to open up a work email. So we're going to talk email. And I'm probably going to have to stop after this, guys, and we'll probably have to do another session if and when anyone actually cares to do one.
Yeah, I care.
Right. So, because again, we're talking about little tools, right? So what was the benefit of me taking the time to learn Vim and Emacs and try to use it for as many things as possible? It meant when I actually got into the realm of wanting to learn how to do email, I lent in the direction of tools that would facilitate my primary editor, which was at the time Vim, right? So as an example, I'm going to switch to my mail workspace. I've got 3 active MUT sessions open. My personal, GrowFlow, which is the company I work for, and Xeris, which is the company I've done consulting for in the past, right? So notice each of them is its own, right? So if I go, oh, sorry, no, yeah, right? I can switch between them, right? These are just 3 different workspaces, 3 different tmux windows essentially in the same session. But here's the cool thing. I'm going to switch to my work email as an example, and we've got a error. Right?
And are these are regular email accounts like Gmail is
this
backing
is Google.
them?
Using
Okay,
Google.
okay.
It's used, so what I'm doing, so the tooling that I'm using to make all this work is I'm using MUT as the mail client. I'm using offline IMAP as the IMAP synchronization tool, right? So I can pull on. So what does that look like when I want to get my mail, right? So here's my personal mail. I want to pull down my latest mail messages, right? It's connecting to Gmail. It's pulling down the mail messages. Oh, wow. I apparently have not done this for a while. Let's not do the personal one. Let's do this one. This one shouldn't be as bad. Maybe it is. I don't know. 36, not so bad. Right? So it's pulling down the messages, right? At second the messages are pulled down, I'm fully disconnected. I can create messages. I can read them. I can do whatever. I'm not connected to the internet at that point, right? It's fully local to my machine. Right, the categorization scheme, right? When you look at the work, right? If I go, CD to backup, right? So if I go to backup, oh, sorry, I'm at mail, right? This is my mail folder, right? Notice I've got a folder for each, right?
That's
my personal,
awesome.
I've got clients that I've worked with, right? And inside each of those folders, right? You've got each of the, right? The actual, we'll call them tags, just set up as a folder. Right. So when I'm in my mail client, when I go back to my mail client, and say, okay, well, I want to go into my personal email, and let's just say I want to search for all, I want to find query. What is this? Right? What is query? I'm going to search for anything that has Atom in it, right? Which means I should now switch to a folder with a view on just the messages that contain the word Atom. And all that is behind the scenes is a tiny little Ruby script that I wrote that waits for the command to be sent to it. And it just does literally a find and a grep through the folder structure to find messages matching that content.
That's awesome, but that's through the mail client, right? So that you can act on the email immediately. But is it also available as a backup in textual format, that if you're just wanting to do some sort of a fancier regex or something on?
Well, that's what I'm saying. So the program that was run there, when I run that query, the actual program that got run when I hit enter is a standalone Ruby script that's just looking through those folders.
Oh, I see.
Nothing to do with Mutt at that point. It's just a standalone automation script.
So you open it up in Mutt after that?
And then what happens is the result, again, little standard tools, the output of that program becomes the result.
So you're using Mutt in that case only to show messages that were fed directly to Mutt itself and nothing else.
Well, I can still go through my entire history, right? So I can still go through my entire history, right? So I'll go back in here, right? If I wanted to find, let's say I wanted to find all occurrences of, let's say I go to, I want to find all occurrences of, let's actually go see. I want to change to the folder, right? Software. Let's go, no. Right, I'll say software. So this is my software folder. This is the historical. So these are not just new. This is like anything that that has been tagged with software is now here, current and historical. So I'm using Mutt as my literal viewport on my entire stored message archive.
Right. Huh.
Right. Now here's the cool thing. When you talk about like what is the benefit there, right, is I get to use all the tools that I've invested the time in, right? So when I want to compose a message, right, let's just say, JP at growthflow.com, I'll just send a message to myself at work, right, hey there. I'm now in Vim, right? I'm in Vim now, right? I can use all my Vim configuration, right? I can say, hey there, right? It can autocorrect to, it'll, right? All my things that I built automation-wise in Vim are still here, right?
What about attachments, like dropping in,
Oh yeah. So I mean, if I want to do an attachment, right, I just attach, right? Okay. Attach, and now I want to actually say, okay, what do I want to go? Well, I want to attach something from, well, now I've got tab complete, right? So I can say develop with passion, right? So I can develop with passion. Let's go active presentation. I'll attach this. There we go. I've just attached a file.
Awesome. Okay. So in terms of like graphical, you don't care about seeing graphical representations.
So let me show you
Old
that, right?
italic.
I'm going to abort this. So notice it's going to say I don't want to send this message. I'm going to postpone it. Right? I'm going to say I want to postpone this message. I'm not going to send it yet. So I'm going to say postpone this message, yes. Which means that the next time I compose a message, it's going to say, do you want to actually recall the postponed message? There it is. Right? But getting back to what you said, Adam, no, you're right. Most people are sending email in structured format. So as an example, West 49, right? I'll go back here. This is going to look way better in the browser. I'll switch to my browser and view the email.
Sweet.
So how are they linked? I see. Just HTML, just straight to HTML.
It's just straight HTML. And what happens when I press L? When I press L, when I'm viewing a message content, it shows me all the format types that are encoded in that message. And if there's one that's HTML, as soon as I hit that, I've got a script that runs that will open that up in my default browser. And again, for me, when I'm switching between work and personal, as an example, here's a personal email, right? I want to switch to my work, right? When I'm looking at my work stuff, all I have to quickly do is go to my work tab, switch back, and now it's on my work tab. And that's my work profile that has the authentication required for that particular target, right? So it becomes a piece of cake to jump between, right, any of them, right? And you notice the whole point is they, again, back to the concept of bookmarking, right? I've got bookmarks here, right? When I'm on here, right, if I go back to my I'll go back to my work. I want to say GFOBB, right? GF is the company I'm working for. That's my open a browser bookmark specific to GrowFlow, right? I'm going to say auth0 rules, right? Dev, right? It's going to open up in, it's because I just had my third tab as the last active one, so I can fix that. But right, but the whole point is it's the muscle memory is switch to the profile you want to make active, which is less than a second. Switch back to your mail client, activate the link. It'll open up out of band in the browser. You don't have to go to it until you want to, and then carry on with your work.
Wow. Yeah, because you know, this answers a big question for me, because I've had a ton of issues from Thunderbird to all other, you know, Kmail and all that other stuff, and I really don't want to be setting stuff up that are textual in a graphic place, if in a graphical interface, if I don't have to, and having yet another, you know, there's a whole pros and cons to having windows that are dedicated for applications versus what you can actually script. And if a shell gives you the text, you can read it and parse it and automate the heck out of it. Whereas if you're locked into some sort of an application, you know, all those possibilities are erased. They're it's just impossible to do, or you have to go through hoops of either automating keyboard sequences or relaunching the application with some parameters. It ends up being, you know, not as powerful. But we're a culture of convenience, not of due diligence, I think. And I think, you know, what you're showing everyone here is that when you do take the time to care about what you do and what you spend your time on, what you support, and that the benefits are incredible in terms of even your life, because you end up getting that time back as time with your family and your 100%, kids and all those things. Where if you do become a slave to convenience only, very few people realize that what you're actually sabotaging is that time you want to get back.
Yeah. And that's honestly, Adam, it's something I say a lot to a lot of people, is the question that people aren't asking. You know, so many people are spending a lot of time saying, okay, well, what's your favorite language, and what's your favorite tool set, and what design paradigm are you chasing? Those are all great questions, but a way, way, way more important question is, are you using your time well?
Yeah.
How valuable is your time to you? Really, really. Like, show me in how you use it. Right? Show me in how you use it, that your time actually means something to you.
Awesome.
Right?
Well, I don't want to keep you anymore. Do you want to keep one last quick, just to finish up the essential
let's have a couple
utils?
of questions.
I don't want to. Do we want to like end it when we have essential terminal utils as the next subject?
Well, so I only put these three on here. I only put these three on here because there's a ton, but I put these three in particular because I've been demonstrating these three primarily in this presentation on purpose, right? Okay. So FCF, right? If you don't know it, go and download it, start using it, right? FCF is the fuzzy finder that you've been seeing all over the place.
Yes,
right?
yes.
It's a Go-based, it's just a Go-based fuzzy finder that you can, and so what's the goal? What is the purpose of the tool? Forget about all the extra stuff it can do. Is given a set of input, it will fuzzy match down as you type, and then you can pipe the result of it into successive programs, even FCF itself, right? So as the example that I gave just before, right, when I go to my work, right, when I said I want to open a browser bookmark, first thing it does is it pipes the content. So what does it do? It caps it does a ls on my bookmarks folder, right? Pipes the result of that into FCF, so I can filter on the list of files in that folder, right? So I'll filter down to my tech. So once I pick a file, the output of this FCF becomes the input to the next FCF, and it'll keep going, right? If I wanted to, right? And again, the nice thing is it's got a very fast fuzzy matching algorithm that it uses, which means the way that when I used to type on like IntelliJ and ReSharper it was always significant letters. So I'm always typing in terms of significant letters in a sentence, right? So when I want to say Ubuntu help tips, right, I should just be able to do UHT, and there we go, right? Ubuntu health tips, right? Because that exists as significant letters in that sentence, and that's what I do. A lot of mine. And why does I do that? Because it lines up with the mnemonic devices that I structure a lot of my workbench around, right? So tools that support that kind of mnemonic naming scheme are the ones that I personally lean toward, right? So FCF 100%, right, is one that you owe it to yourself to just, like, there's so many ways you can use this tool, right? Because all it does is fuzzy match an input, right? If you just focus, right? So one of the things that I used to take art back in high school, and one of the things our art teacher used to do, which I thought was a really dumb exercise at the time, but now I see what he was trying to do with us, is he would give us a shape for the week. And that was the only shape we could use for that week to construct a drawing, right? And then the following week, he would give us another shape, right? And what I didn't realize he was doing was he was stretching our creative boundaries, right? So if all you've got is this tiny little tool that just does this one thing, which is the Unix way, how can you use that and pipe it and pair it with other programs that also just do one thing well as well? And I'm telling you, when you start thinking about the problem differently, the possibilities open up in a way that you probably can't even fathom right now, right? So as again, that whole concept of, I mean, you're gonna laugh, Adam, you know, this is kind of funny, but you know, when I used to say I use Vim for everything, right? I literally use Vim for everything. I Twitter inside of Vim, right? Because it's just a script. As long as I can interface with an API system, right? I can go and get my most recent tweet messages inside of my editor, right? Why? Because the tool, the reason that I personally chose to invest a lot of time in tools like Emacs, and well, Emacs is something that I'm still not as proficient in as Vim, but the reason I've been looking at it more over the last several months is working on closure stuff, which Emacs is just way better set up to deal with closure-based environments. So
well, sacrilege, Vim and Emacs user at the same time. But if
honestly,
anyone
I'm
to
about.
pull it off,
I'll tell you this. I'll tell you this. I'm probably. My guess is that by come the end of the year, Vim won't be in my tool set anymore.
Well, I worked with a guy that was an Emacs user, and you know, for a long time, and you know, he gave me the logical reasons for that. I think there's just unfortunately an indoctrination, and you know, kind of you're not an expert in either, and so you pick a camp, and because there's a learning curve, once you go down one, there's a perception of diminishing returns for learning the other.
And mine is a much more practical reason. Of all the scripting that I do, Vim scripting is the smallest. And now that I understand Clojure, I know that I can write anything in terms of scripting wise for Emacs exactly how I want it. Right. So I now have a proper language. And again, I'm not slamming Vim script, but if you've ever had to write anything in Vim script, it's a mess. And I would just much rather would work with a first class clean language
it's kind of like Perl. Like a lot of the stuff that I try to do on the command line, like the command prompt on Vim is incredibly cryptic, right? It's kind of like Perl or something like that. That it's just, why am I doing these set of symbols, right?
So the reason that I actually mentioned, like I said, Emacs / Spacemacs, is I'm using Spacemacs, right? Which is kind of like the best of both worlds, because it's got out of the box, it defaults to using the evil mode, which is the Vim editor mode. So I can still use my Vim motions and all that stuff, because the Vim motions, in my opinion, the Vim motions are the biggest strength of Vim for navigating around text files. But then couple that with you know, first class kind of non-hampered scripting language, right? And the nice thing is again, because a lot of this automation that I do is not necessarily Vim bound, it's scripts, it's tools that are calling out to other external scripts. The editor that I happen to use to trigger those things is not really the big deal, right? So, but yeah, so I mean, I think that, you know, FCF, tmuxinator, what is tmuxinator, right? Tmuxinator is, if I switch back to my dev tools, I'll show you the one for, let's take a look at this one right here, right? So I'll go to my, which one should I do? Live. Yeah, I'll do live. Muxinator live. I think it was, oh, sorry. There we go. So tmuxinator, this is automation for my tmux session. So when I start up so as an example, I'm going to start this session here I'm going to switch back to work, and I'm going to go muxs, and I'll go live, right? So GF live. It's going to, again, optimal commands, just like Adam mentioned, are ones that I can just fire and forget, right? Eventual consistent environment, right? Eventually consistent environment is what's happening here. It's doing its thing. It's not ready yet, but I know I can carry on doing other stuff. And when I finally am ready, I can switch back to my live environment. It's opened up my editor on one tab. It's starred my runners on another tab, right? The whole environment is structured and my panes are split in the way that I need for this project, and everything is going, and didn't have to do the work, right? And so all it is it's just simple. It's a DSL for session creation. That's it. Right?
Yeah, it's awesome. I mean, for people that are not familiar with Tmux, I used it myself as well in a lot of servers where I could just remote in over Mosh, and I'd always have my IRC open in there so that it would never lose history and things like that. But I would have a persistent session no matter where I was. Yeah. And then if I was using something like WeChat, I could also hook into that even on my mobile phone, yeah, to just have a terminal on my mobile phone and have the IRC session visible. If I was waiting for an answer, I could, yeah, check on the bus whether that someone's replied to me in that IRC channel and things like that.
Right. So the nice thing about this is, in terms of our event modeling lingo, these files become, right, this is the command definition for a session created event, right? That's all it is, right?
Nice.
It's a description of something that we want to happen, right? The created session is ultimately the, right? But this is it. This is literally, this would be the command, right, event to create this particular session. That's it. Right? And the nice thing is again, what are the goals? The goals are, can I look at this and understand, right, what happens here? What happens pre-window? Pre-window, any window that opens in this session, I want you to use, right, a node 10 environment. I want you to source the aliases file. It lives at the root of this folder, right? Where's the folder root? Right here, mm-hmm, right? I want you to I want you to run the dev alias, and I want you to run the remote storefront GQL alias. Right? That'll happen for any pane that opens. And notice the windows, it's a structured definition of how I want the windows organized. I want an editor window, and I want a runners window, and I want a cloud functions window. And inside of my runners window, I want 2 active panes. Right? It's a declarative way to lay out your sessions, right? So you'll notice if I switch to my, the one for my mail, right? So you'll see because it's all defined here. The mail one is right here. What's my mail look like? Right.
Right.
It's just a session with the root at my home folder. Yeah. I've got personal grow flow Xeris, right? The layout is even vertical. And you notice all I'm doing is just varying the command that gets run for each, right? mut-d, mut-gf, mut-Xeris.
Back to just a quick question on the email stuff. Sometimes I want to search across multiple inboxes because I don't know which account I had a reply in, yeah, for something. Yeah. Do you have a unified inbox type of automation? I would imagine you would.
Yeah, so what I do for that, all I do for that is I've got a command that basically just uses symlinks to create a top level virtual folder that then gets found and grepped over.
Ah, I see, okay.
Right, so it becomes, again, little tools. What's the little tool? Mm-hmm. I can create a dummy folder on the fly that symlinks as the top level root of those folders, right? So what does it do? Those 3 folders become subfolders, yeah, to that virtual folder. And right, now I'm just actually doing a find over one virtual folder that recursively grabs everything.
Now, since you're working, one thing that also was probably on people's minds, because you're doing a lot of, especially with the email, you're doing a lot of stuff locally. Yeah. You know, in a lot of people's emails, I know one of my first Gmail account is probably like, you know, it's too big. Yeah. What do you do for data management, backups, and synchronizing? Because you have a lot of things that you control, and owning your stuff is awesome. And I see you doing that. You're really using services as services, but I see that you're really owning your data. How do you manage and make sure that you have backups and synchronization across devices and things like that?
So in the dev tools, right? So again, in automation, I've got an rsync backups folder, right? So mm-hmm, you notice on my automation scripts there, automation rsyncs, right? Gazelle, Thelio, Restore. Those are backup scripts that will run periodically on a cron job to synchronize to different locations.
Oh, good. You excluded node modules.
Oh yeah, I'm excluding a lot of stuff. Yeah, I'm excluding a lot of stuff. Yeah.
I can see how you're saving space. No, go on.
Yeah, I'm excluding a lot of stuff. Yeah, and so the thing is, and the nice thing is those can be run explicitly, right? So typically because I spend a lot of time on my desktop, but when I go from my desktop to my laptop, literally all I do is, the first thing I do when I move my laptop down to my downstairs I prefer to be explicit about it versus running down a cron job. So all I'll do is I'll switch to my space 7 on my laptop, which is my SSH'd into my desktop, and
Right.
run the copy back to my laptop, right? So that everything is there, and it literally runs in less than a couple of seconds, right?
Yeah.
So and then vice versa, the inverse when I'm going back to my desktop, right? So
Right.
and I think I still like to see it running, because sometimes there'll be failures, and those things I need to be able to be proactive about versus just, so, but yeah, I mean, so that, but again, it's just another set of scripts,
Yeah.
right? Like
Right.
it just falls under your kind of automation hierarchy, right? And you just kind of, just work it out.
Guys, I think I really need to leave.
Yeah, we probably,
I think we all should wrap it up. It's been 2
we
hours,
probably
but
should call
this
it,
is-
but yeah.
Yeah,
But we
I just got
definitely
back
will
from
have,
work.
Daniel,
So,
thank you so much for
fantastic,
joining us.
yeah.
We're going to do another session. Maybe
Yeah.
we can do some pairing with JP to dive into some more of the stuff that we're doing with the event models. And I want to see, how JP would tackle some of the programming tasks versus like how Krzysztof has been doing it and others. So we can get into some coding. Using an incredible environment, I think what JP's done is really amazing. It just shows what's possible, and I hope that everyone sees their potential by seeing such an example of just what the possibilities are out there and what levels of productivity is right there for you and not very far away. It just is being aware of what's possible. And so JP, thank you for opening people's eyes to a whole new world, I think, for most people,
Yeah,
as
awesome.
to just how far you can go and
It's
like how
mind-blowing.
awesome you can have your control back of your life, of getting your time back, of using this to also, help others to do the same and do it in such a clear way. You're an excellent instructor for what you've taught people over so many years. So your style of presentation and just the kind of giving and gracious human being you are. Thank you very much for doing this, and I hope that we can get back together, soon.
Can I say one more thing, guys?
Yeah.
Because this is important. I keep talking about, how we use our time, right? All this is just noise if it doesn't actually equate to something real for me and my family, right? And I'm being kind of very raw and honest here, right? Getting to, let's say, I don't want to say I won't ever try to come off as, even remotely arrogant. Adam knows that, like he's known me for a long time, right? But having a very high level of proficiency, personally would mean nothing if it actually didn't, and this is not a selfish statement, it's just a practical statement, actually benefit our family, right? There's a very tangible, concrete, financial side effect to getting proficient in any of this stuff, right? And this is not, just to be clear, right? This is not a humble brag, right? Because you want to talk about opening up the door of possibilities, right? Because sometimes you don't know, right? And this is not, and I'm not an outlier in this respect by any means, right? My first year of consulting, right? And this is when I was still pretty proficient, nowhere near where I am now, by adopting a super simple set of practices. And we can talk about this at other, because there's a story that I completely bypassed that Adam asked me to share that I totally forgot. And we'll just have to do it another time.
I didn't know whether you were comfortable doing it, so I didn't ask.
No, it's okay. It's okay. Yeah, we'll do it. I think we should do it another time. I don't want to I've got to get going as well, but I don't want to take anyone else's time too much either. But be all end all is this, right? And trust me that I'm not remotely throwing this out as a brag. It's meant to be inspirational. My first year of consulting, I did $1 million, right, as a consultant. Now, why is that beneficial, right? Money is just a tool, right? I've worked for years at making less than 50,000 a year, right? Money is just a tool. If you don't have a plan, you're going to waste it. Okay, it doesn't matter how much you have. And the whole aspect of getting a plan in motion, whether it's coming up with an automation plan, my bigger overarching question is why? Why are you bothering with any of this? What is the point, right? Like, it doesn't matter, right? You guys become event-driven experts. I know what Adam's goal is, right? We've talked about this. I know exactly, right? He's, you know, he is eating it right now, right? On purpose, right? And I know why, because he's got a vision, right? And without, like, there's a great verse in God's word that says people perish for lack of vision, right?
Exactly.
And so my challenge back is, if you don't have one, it's still not too late. I met a guy who was 67 years old. After one of my boot camps, he comes up to me. He was a retired programmer, and he said, I feel like I spent my entire career not understanding what it meant to be a developer. 67, guys. He went back to school at 67, did his computer science degree again, 71, regraduated. How many people do you think were telling him he was off his rocker? 73, he launched a multi-million-dollar internet startup. All just from getting a vision. Yeah, this is not about money, guys. I don't care about money, right? I'm not throwing these numbers out to, right, for anything other than shift the perspective. If you're surrounded by people that say, I'm doing 80, I just need to get to 90. Your mindset is going to be, I'm doing 80, I just need to get to 90, right? If you're weightlifting with people who are like, oh, I'm doing half my body weight, I just want to get to 0.7 of my body weight. Right? If all of a sudden you jump into a gym where guys are doing 3 times their body weight without blinking, your whole world flips on its head. Right? And this group for each other should be that. Right? A constant reminder of what the possibilities are. Right? Of where you haven't thought about, like, because that's the thing, right? I'm still like this. If you don't have a why, find a why. And I'm telling you, trust me, it better not be a financial why. Because I guarantee you, finances are not the goal. It's what you want to do with those finances that are the goal, right? Iron that out, right? And then you're rocking, right? So anyway, I know it sounds a little bit soapboxy, but it's important.
No, it's
it
awesome.
really is important.
It is awesome. It's humbling, you know, just listening to you.
Yeah,
Thank you
we're
so
very
much,
we're
man.
very happy that you've volunteered your time to present, and your door is always open. I'm hoping that we can get into some coding with you on some of the stuff. It'll be trivial for you, but I want you to see what we're up to, and and obviously we're also curious in any other stuff that you're gonna have, because I think we just scratched the surface.
we all have something to teach each other. I guarantee you that, right? Every single one of us in here has something to teach the other, right? And anyone who says otherwise is, you know, probably in that expert mindset right now and needs to shake it.
Yeah.
Right? So,
let's get out of that expert mindset.
Yeah.
JP, again, thank you from the bottom of my heart. And I think I speak for everyone here that they're lucky to interact with you. For the others, they'll have to look at the recording and hopefully catch us on the other side when we're doing some more stuff with you. I'm hoping very soon we'll coordinate offline to see what works for you, and see if we can, you know, patch up some of my work on the project, and see how we can make our time tracking app work in the scenarios that we talked about, and all that, and all the good stuff we're doing with event modeling. Thank you so much for seeing what our efforts been,
thank
what I've
you
been doing, and all that.
Yeah, thanks for having me. And honestly, guys, I know I said I'd open it up for, you know, I'm not trying to keep anyone here longer than they need to be in, because I want to get going as well. But, you know, I'm happy to stay on for another 10, 15 minutes if people have got questions. Just want to have some dialogue. You know, so feel free, like, you know, if we time box it to shutting down at 2:30 at the latest.
Yeah.
Anyone who needs to go, just go. Like, I'm not trying to keep anyone here by any means, right? So, but if you've got questions.
So we got
please,
19 minutes.
19 minutes, yeah.
Yeah, 18 minutes, 18 and a half minutes. I'm going to be quiet so that you guys can ask questions.
I'm going to take off. Thanks, JP. This has been great. And I really like the fact that, you know, the mindset, you know, like, you know, that overused words about how to break the problems down, keep simple, reusable, composable, you know, and then basically that whole concept about, you know, your basically your commands are mnemonic based, but it's really your domain language. Your commands are not following they're following the domain of what you're trying to accomplish. They're not following the tool itself and how it might implement that. And once you get those mindset and you break the problem down that way, whether it's your scripting tools or your programming or your work, you find those simple reusable things, and you learn a lot from just taking everything down to its first principle and just keeping it doing its purpose and uploading it. So
yeah, no, that's awesome. Yeah, there's such a huge benefit, like, you know, in nailing down that ubiquitous language, regardless of what problem space you're looking at. And that's the thing is, you know, we do get tunnel vision on thinking in terms of ubiquitous language in terms of just software design, but it actually transcends software design, right? It literally is a language for a particular domain that you happen to be actually focusing on. And if you can actually nail that language down, you can actually, because what's the benefit? The benefit of ubiquitous language is the ability to actually now reason about that space more intelligently in a unified way with people that you talk about with. So when I say to Adam, workspace and Windows, right? He knows what I'm talking about if we're talking in the domain of I3. If we collectively as a group say our domain for window management is Windows and spaces, that's our domain model, right? And that does correlate to how you actually then start tackling, like a lot of stuff. So yeah, that's awesome.
Right.
Rick, yeah, thank you.
All right, thanks a lot. I gotta go deal with the kids.
Go for it. Thank you. Yeah, for sure.
Have a good day.
Yeah, you too.
Bye.
Yeah, see you, Daniel. Thanks. I know you got to jump as well.
Yeah, exactly. Bye.
Go for it. Yeah.
Any last questions from anyone? We have 5 minutes, I think 10 minutes maybe. What do we have here? No, still.
If there's no questions, there's no biggie. That's not a biggie either.
No worries. We don't want to make it
expectations,
too long. So what? Thank you, JP, one more time, and then I'll connect with you. We're gonna do some. I want to do some coding with you. The last time we did that was on stage in 07. So
yeah.
see how far I've regressed.
Yeah.
So it'll be fun, and I think if anyone else is up for it, it'll be kind of fun to switch back and forth, share the same repo, and watch how we can learn from one another
We can
in
build
all the different
something out
stacks.
together. That would be fun.
Yeah, and it would be interesting to see what you think of my code and other people's code, and how we would continue, our craft to become better developers and develop with passion, as you say.
Yeah.
Over all these years. I had to say it.
That's awesome. Yeah.
Krzysztof, did you have anything?
No, I don't have.
Okay.
All right. Well, no, thanks for the opportunity, Adam. It was an honor. So.
It's an opportunity for us, honestly. So thank you for spending the time. I know that you have a busy day, and it's your daughter's 18th, I believe.
Yes.
So you have
crazy times.
Yeah.
Crazy times. Yeah.
Yeah. So you have a busy day, and thank you again. Say hi to the fam, and
sure.
we'll hook up next week or something like that. On the same, we might even just, if you want to do a special one that's outside of our meetup too. If you want to finish the rest of the automation, which I think is critical, I'd love to have that on record, record it, maybe do it via something better than Zoom, so that we have better quality recording. Maybe do something on your end. We can coordinate the video footage so that we can make a nice screencast type of experience for people. But
for sure. Yeah, I'll let you know. It's gonna. Yeah, I'll let you know when I've got some. My schedule is pretty busy for the next couple of weeks, so I'll.
If there's anything I can help with, let me know.
I'll synchronize with you.
Yeah, sync up with me, and if there's anything I can help you with, of course, just let me know. More than happy to help you. So
awesome. Thanks, guys.
All right, JP. Have a beautiful day.
Thanks.
Yeah, you too, guys. See you later.
See you. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
See you next time.
Bye.